News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. North America's building trades unions say that a federal energy regulatory commission decision means thousands of construction jobs and $40 million in additional tax revenue for Calvert County, Maryland. The commission gave final approval for the construction and operation of the Point LNG project in Lusby, Maryland. The unions say it means secure employment for the next several years for over 3,000 skilled craft professionals. Building Trades President Sean McGarvey says the negotiated union agreement with Dominion Energy ensures the safest, most highly trained and skilled workers in the world will be building this project. The project's total cost is estimated at between $3.4 and $3.8 billion. McGarvey said large infrastructure projects like Cove Point create thousands of jobs and also create an economic multiplier effect for other sectors of the economy, like manufacturing and services. Hundreds of union members and supporters rallied in Union City, New Jersey Tuesday, demanding that Alaris Health Management immediately reinstate about 24 1199 SEIU workers who were locked out of their jobs after a 3-day strike in mid-September. The certified nursing assistants who were locked out tried for months to negotiate a new labor contract before staging the 3-day strike. Davika Smith is one of the locked-out workers.
We've been negotiating for months for a fair contract, affordable health care, increasing our wages, and the management never wanted to come to a table with a fair contract. So we was forced to go out on strike. When we went on strike, the 3-day strike, Friday, I was told from the management that there was no work for me. After 8.5 years of working there, I wasn't on a schedule. I went out on a legal strike, and what they did to me was illegal.
If Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker isn't labor's political enemy number one, he's very close to the top of that list for destroying collective bargaining rights for public workers in the state in 2011. He's up for re-election now after surviving a recall attempt, and the race is rated a toss-up. 2 new polls are out. One from Gravis Marketing shows Democrat Mary Burke ahead of Walker by 5 points. But a Marquette University poll released Wednesday shows likely voters favoring Walker by 5 points. The Milwaukee-based Marquette poll shows Walker up by 5 points, 50-45, among likely voters.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
West side, people don't surrender. They bring down, but they still rock on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my town.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots of things to talk about. The jobs. Did you know here in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there are 220,000 open jobs right now as we speak on the governor's job gateway website? Did you know that? Did you know there are 220,000 jobs? Did you also know that back in January, the good governor himself, the more jobs governor, remember him? said he has, thanks to him and not taxing the frackers, created 220,000 jobs. Am I seeing a pattern? Is that the biggest number he can dream up? Is that the biggest number you could pull out of you know where? Just a thought, because and this is what gets me. When you look at the claim of there are 220,000 jobs out there, don't you know? Where'd these jobs come from? Well, it turns out they have, and good for them for thinking about it. You got to give them credit for at least for thinking about aggregating all of the websites that offer job services all over the country, and even the ones that are scams. Good for them. Put them all together so that people can have one centralized place to go with taxpayer dollars to put it together. And look, I'm not against the idea. I think it's actually give them credit where credit is due, even if some of the jobs are less than on the up and up. Like the one looking for car dates. You kind of got to wonder. Another one having casting couch openings. The exotic dancers, moms and their daughters kind of stuff. But look, I guess, and in the Corbett's defense, and I will defend the Corbett, because you have to be a little fair here. You got to be fair. Okay, you got to give him credit. He made this website, and you're going to have some people out there who are going to put stuff out on Craigslist. I don't know. I don't know if Craigslist's the best place to be looking for a job, but hey, wherever. The fact of the matter is he's saying 220,000 jobs, but you got to wonder how many people are unemployed in the state and how many people have been thrown off of the unemployment rolls. So you got to start asking the question, if you're throwing these big numbers around, can you back it up? And are they real jobs? I remember when I was looking for a job. I remember, knocking on doors and people say, oh yeah, you'd see the ads in the paper and all this stuff, and you'd go and they go, oh no, that's old. That was months ago. And you got to wonder how much of that is that as well. And then when you hear Corbett start talking about, family sustaining jobs, I went on the website, and a good number of the things that I saw were, I guess it comes down to your definition of family sustaining wage. I don't know how many people cutting grass are going to be able to sustain a family. I don't know how many low-wage service sector jobs there are. Now, they trotted out the guy from the National Manufacturers Association here in Pennsylvania. They trotted him out, and of course, throwing the old, we can't find people who can find a drug test. And again, you look at the real numbers. I mean, it's nice to stay with a frame. And it is political time, so I do fully comprehend the political nature of the statements, because understand what the frame here is. The frame here is Pennsylvania fell from 7th all the way down to 47th in job creation during the governor's tenure. Yeah, I think everybody agrees that that's what happened. We were doing fairly well. Came out of the Great Recession, not totally unscathed, but in a lot better shape than the rest of the country. And then we followed the bad policies brought to us by the Corbettites, by the corporatists. It's not just Corbett. It was that whole movement of right-wing T-types in 2010. The Wagners, the Walkers, the Kasichs, the Scotts, the Corbetts, the LePages. You go around the Snyders. You go down the list of all of these failed ideas, and they all prescribed the same cure, which is more handouts for corporations, more deregulation. Basically, the Reagan. These are your basic Reagan acolytes, which is the market will decide with big checks from us. And that's what we did. We took money from education in all of those states. All of them followed this same thing. Take money from education, create a crisis over there so we can begin to profitize and privatize public education. Take that money, give it to the job creators, who will then put it in their pocket and go, oh, gee, there's nobody who wants to work. They're all lazy and on drugs. They'd rather be on the welfare and on the unemployment because those benefits are far too generous. So when you hear Corbett say something like this, playing into that frame, because you start thinking, wow, 220,000 jobs, that's a lot. And the 220,000 that he created, wow, that's a lot too. In a state of more than 13 million, you got to go, well, that's not really a big number. But here's the thing. Much like I go back to this 220,000 job openings number, and I'll compare it to the 220,000 jobs that Corbett created. When you really looked at the jobs that were created, Corbett says because of the Marcellus Shale, most of them you go, really? How many long-haul truck driving jobs out of Philadelphia? How many P&D jobs? How many pickup and delivery jobs, truck driving jobs in Philadelphia did the gas drilling in northwestern Pennsylvania actually create? How many sewer jobs did it create in Philadelphia? And when you went through the list of the jobs that they were claiming were actually created because of the drilling, about 90% of them, you go, are you kidding? What did any of this stuff have to do with the claim? When you boiled it all down, you could say the drillers created about 7,000 jobs. So if you want to give Corbett credit for something, it's about 7,000 jobs. Now, again, when you use the Arthur Anderson type accounting that the right so loves, and politicians in general love to inflate numbers, those 7,000, I guess you could come to a significantly higher number by just saying that the people who were in those jobs were hired, and we hired 220,000 people. Granted, there were only 7,000 jobs, but 220,000 people churned through them. That could be accurate, because we do know that most of the people in those jobs don't stay long. Most of them are transients. So they come and they go. So then you got to ask the question, how many Pennsylvanians were actually hired? Now, I'm not saying that number is 0, but I am guaranteeing you it is not 220,000. So again, as we look at the political messaging war that's going on, the Corbetts of the world been a little fast and loose with the actual facts. And when you look at and give credit to Fresh Start PA, who came up with these, and I don't even know why you start looking up exotic dancers for bachelor parties. I don't know why you'd be looking up casting couch opportunities, but they did, and they found them on the website. And you start going, again, I'm not saying that it was a bad idea to start the website. I'm just saying maybe a thought could have gone into the sources that you're pulling in. Now, give credit where it's due. They did pull in the monsters and the resume.com or whatever other sites are out there to bring in Pennsylvania type jobs. And then you got to start questioning how many Pennsylvania jobs are there actually, because I know a lot of organizations, they'll put the entire nation because they're looking for somebody anywhere, as long as you're willing to move. How many of that is? So when you see these claims, John decide. But I find it interesting. But more interesting than that, I find it interesting that this governor has time and time again played into that line of, well, there are jobs out there and they're lazy and they don't want to work, and kind of bringing that along. So it kind of makes me, I don't know, not all that trusting, of our governor. But, that's why November 4th is so important. Anyway, going to talk about that. Got a whole bunch of stuff on the agenda. The Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center's got a new report out on us being taxed enough already. We're teed to death. Turns out not so much. So when we come back, we're going to talk with Sharon Ward, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
USA is drowning in grafted lies. Save the USA and resume the ties that bind. Stop taking all our money and shipping it offshore. Do the job you're elected for.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As he leaves American soil, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will return home triumphant. He's increased his public image and raked in billions of foreign investment dollars from U.S. corporations. Such investment will boost the Indian economy, but the AIDS advocacy group Health Gap says that for the good of many around the world, the U.S. should refrain from interfering with the Indian pharmaceutical industry.
India is now the center, really, of the production of low-cost, high-quality generic AIDS drugs for people living with HIV around the world.
Matthew Kavanaugh is a senior policy analyst with Health Gap.
In the U.S., a year's worth of first line or second line, kind of some of the newer AIDS drugs, can cost you upwards of $15,000 to $20,000. In India, they're being produced now for $95 per patient per year. So we've seen more than 99% reduction in the cost of drugs by making them generically.
Kavanaugh says Modi is facing major pressure from U.S. drug makers, unhappy with the way public health considerations factor into Indian patent law, and they want more restrictions on generic suppliers. If Modi caves to that pressure, AIDS patients and their loved ones could be hard hit.
If the changes in the laws mean that Indian companies are no longer allowed to make all of these really important drugs, then actually it's really hard to see where we might look to. There's some important industry in Latin America, South Africa, there's some more important industry in Egypt, but none of whom have the scale and quality that exists in the Indian marketplace. It's ironic because one of the signature foreign policy initiatives of the United States government has been the response to HIV. All of that would be massively undermined if the United States government itself wasn't able to buy low-cost generic HIV drugs from India and import them into countries in Africa.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Coleman Lowndes. Laura Ingraham zeroed in on reports based on comments from Republican Representative Jason Chaffetz that suggested that a White House intruder confronted and overpowered a female Secret Service agent to claim that the Obama administration's politically correct hiring practices compromised security.
The idea that this guy could get in and then overpower an agent who I guess was female. I mean, there are a lot of female agents who are really strong and large, but I mean, you do get the sense at some point that political correctness could have been a factor here, right? All these decisions about who gets what position and where they're stationed, political correctness comes into the decision-making, and this is no place for political correctness.
Ingram's comments about gender come on the heels of her show last week, in which the host suggested that teaching young girls to dress modestly is an important step toward avoiding objectification, misogyny, and date rape. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Where common sense, reason, and community come together. The Rick Smith Show.
Now, people, because together we will stand, every boy, every girl, and a man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So during the break, I go to check my Twitter account, and there it is. Monster.com has offered me a job. I had the audacity, the gall, to question the website that the governor set up, and I got to think, Monster's shilling for the governor now. I got to defend their aggregate site there, putting Monster's jobs in there. So they're going to hire me. I just have to click here. It's either that or somebody's got their eyes on everything we all do. One or the other, you decide. Anyway, you remember 2010, the whole Tea Party thing, the whole T, and for my T friends who don't know, T actually stands for something, taxed enough already. We've been told this frame that, oh my God, we're just beyond taxed. Property taxes are killing us. It's the end of civilization. We're the highest in the world. Well, the folks over at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center put out a new report today on property taxes, basically asking the question, what should we be doing? Should we throw the whole system out, chuck it, as some are saying, or should we do some smart things? Which is why I've asked Sharon Ward. She's the executive director over at the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Sharon, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, happy to be with you, Rick.
So I look at the report that you guys put out today, reform, not repeal. Are there actual voices out there saying we chuck the whole system?
Yeah, sure there are. As you've mentioned, the Tea Party groups have are really on a rampage about property taxes. They want to eliminate school property taxes entirely and replace that system with the new system that increases taxes on working people and renters and actually reduces taxes on corporations. So it's a problem. And what our report looks at is, so where are we in terms of property taxes? And, what we've discovered is that although property taxes are probably universally disliked, they're not universally high. And we really believe that, property taxes are very varied across the state, and that rather than chucking the whole system, we can take a smart, targeted approach, improve our property tax relief, increase education funding, and we can save our schools and solve the problem. So that's what we're saying.
So you're not in favor of funding education by sandwich sales and car washes and bake sales?
You can't even do a bake sale anymore because, there are requirements about what you're able to feed kids in school.
Those job-killing regulations.
They're not healthy. No, it's right. We got to protect our kids from sugary treats. But no, look, property taxes have been used to pay for schools for 150 years in Pennsylvania. They make sense. They're stable. If, the robber barons end up bankrupting the system and blowing up our financial system the way they did in 2009, property taxes are stable. You don't have a big drop in tax revenue that can threaten our public schools. So it makes a lot of sense to use property taxes to pay for schools. But, in Pennsylvania, the problem we have, and this is a legitimate point.
We're getting old.
We are getting old, but we do rely more on property taxes than other states. So if the state would have held up their end of the bargain, the way local property taxpayers are holding up their end of the bargain, we could better fund our schools and reduce the need to increase our local property taxes.
Right, but that takes into to someone believing that our governor actually wants public schools and that what we're seeing is not a manufactured, created crisis to put schools in untenable positions so that you have to privatize it. That goes to a whole nother thing. For me, I say the state should be back to where they were supposed to be, which is, as I understand it, as a number of superintendents have told me, half of the funding should come from the state instead of like the 30% it is now.
Yeah, it's about a third. 33% is paid for by the state, and nationally that number is 44%. So we are not doing a good job. And the state needs to pick up more of the cost of education. So I think it's, and we're doing our kids a disservice, and we're also, we're also not, and we're also asking more of local property taxpayers.
Yeah, and the other part of this is, like last night, for instance, I went to my daughter was going to play basketball. So there was the Booster Club meeting, and the Booster Club meeting was all about how can we raise money. And I'm going, but for the bus, for this, for that, for balls, for shoes. I'm going, really? When I was in high school, and this is like 100 years ago, that stuff was just there. It was part of what the tax dollars covered. Now, not at all, and it's sickening. Let me ask you about you guys did.
Let me talk to you about that. Because it's a really interesting point. A couple of years ago, actually a while ago, 5 or 6 years ago, there was some discussion about raising the personal income tax, which would have been about For a middle-income family, it would have been something like $20 a month for a personal income tax increase. And the Republicans in the legislature said, we don't want to do that because that's, what we could, it's what our fees are for Little League. But look at what's going on now. Out-of-pocket costs for kids, for sports and dance and music and the marching band are through the roof.
Yep.
So everybody's paying more. But no, they obviously didn't think about that when they decided to cut state public education funding.
Yeah, I mean, and I think most people my age think it's the way it was when we were in school. That we haven't had this radical change that's gone on over the last at least the last 3 years, but probably the last decade and a half, where we've moved to these charter schools and we've divided the pie in half, and the money's, in my view, being misspent in all kinds of places.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. We have really now 3 systems of public education that we're funding. We got the public schools, and we have the charter schools, and we have the cyber charter schools that are also costly and lack accountability.
Yeah, all public funded schools.
Yep, all publicly funded. And then we've got the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, which is scholarships, which is really kind of a voucher program. So if we took, funds for those other types of schools and reinvested them back into the education system, it would be smarter. We'd be doing better things for our kids.
So how do we compare to the states around us? How do we compare to New York, New Jersey, Ohio, Maryland, West Virginia? Where do we fit in that whole dynamic?
Well, I know this is going to come as a shock to you, and to your listeners, but Pennsylvania is in the middle. I know that that's a surprise.
But I thought we were the worst. I thought we were taxed higher than everyone in the history of civilization.
That's right. That's right. We're taxed higher than everyone. Nope. We are in the middle. We're lower than New York and New Jersey. We're about the same as Ohio, and we're a little bit higher than West Virginia and Maryland and Delaware. Again, it's a matter of how you decide you want to pay for your schools. West Virginia and Maryland and and Delaware all have higher income taxes than we do, and they ask less of local property taxpayers, and that's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe we should do it like other states and do it like with lottery, do it with vice spending, because you remember the Camelot Global when they wanted to privatize the management of the lottery, and the woman CEO came and testified. What struck me in her testimony is she said that in the UK, where they had the lottery and this company managed it there, that they used the money to fund the Olympics, to fund humanities, to fund the arts, to fund enrichment programs above and beyond the necessary things like taking care of seniors and education. And it just strikes me that we use vice spending for those kind of things like education and senior programs. I guess it's just something that struck me.
They have better infrastructure. They've got fast trains. They have public spaces that, like libraries and town squares and buildings that they don't have to have a bake sale to raise, money to support. And, in other places, your kids' education, your post-secondary education, your health care, those aren't things that should be reserved for people with money. Those are things that everyone should have.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Sharon Ward, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, talking about their new report released today, Reform, Not Repeal. Pennsylvania can provide property tax relief and protect public schools. So let's talk about that. I've heard some people saying we just chuck the whole system. Is it possible? I mean, really, honestly and truthfully, is it possible to chuck the whole system and raise personal income taxes high enough and sales taxes high enough to be able to fund the schools?
No. The short answer is no. The plan that's in place would tax food. It would tax childcare, it would tax healthcare services, it would tax a number of things. And still, the way the plan is written, because it caps how much school districts could actually get, over 5 years, our schools would have $2.5 billion less than they would have otherwise.
And so by having these regressive taxes, what we're actually doing is you'd be actually harming the bottom, probably 80-90% of the economic scale, correct?
The people who rent their homes would be paying for tax breaks for the person with the biggest house in the neighborhood.
That's the way it should be. That's the American dream.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry.
But
Sorry,
seriously,
I didn't get the memo on that one.
But seriously, I mean, nobody wants to see, and we've heard the horror stories of people losing their homes because they fell behind on their property taxes. I mean, there was the one story out in the western part of the state. I think it was like for like $1.50. Somehow she ended up getting her house taken away. Nobody wants to see anyone lose their house because they don't have the income to be able to pay their property tax, do they?
No, absolutely not. So, there's a couple things here. It's true. What we found is that property taxes are not high across the state. In fact, in a lot of school districts, particularly in the rural school districts, they're actually low, much lower than the state average. But there are areas that do have high property taxes where people pay a lot. And even in areas that don't have high property taxes, folks have difficulty paying them. So we think you need to do a couple of things. One is we have a property tax a property tax relief program for seniors. We haven't raised the rebate amount for that program in 8 going on 9 years. So it's time to revisit that. And just like the minimum wage, we should index it to inflation so that the seniors are getting a little bit more money every year. And the other thing we have to do is recognize that working people who are more likely to have a mortgage and pay their property taxes also can struggle to pay their property taxes. 12 states have property tax relief for non-elderly, for working folks, and we think Pennsylvania needs to join that list.
Seems reasonable to me. Are there other examples of states around the country that do these kind of things?
Yeah, a bunch of them do. And as you can imagine, Minnesota and Wisconsin have really good property tax relief programs that middle income people can apply for if their property taxes as a share of their overall income is high. So, it just makes sense. We don't need to throw the whole system out. We don't need to take a chainsaw to public education. What we do need to do is to figure out smart ways to get property tax relief to the right communities and to the people who need it.
And finally, for those of us who think we're taxed enough, we're the highest taxed in the entire Commonwealth. About what percentage of the 500 school districts would you say are in that higher range? Because we like to all believe that we're the burdened, we're the persecuted. About how many?
30 school districts out of 500 have high property taxes. 30 out of 500, that's about 6%. In contrast, about 1 out of every 4 school districts has low property taxes. So, many more people have low taxes than high taxes. That's the bottom line.
So basically what you're saying then is eventually the low taxes are going to have to be brought up a little bit, which will then drive the Tea Party people even crazier.
No, I mean, the point here is that we're not being taxed to death. There are some places that are very unique that have high property taxes. Here's the thing that's ironic. The places that have the high property taxes are places that are growing. So we talk about economic growth. The governor Republicans always talking about how we need jobs and we need to grow the economy. And we know that that's important. But the places where that happens, they bring in more people, and those people have kids, and they need more schools, we need more roads, and so their property taxes go up. So, it's I don't know what we're going to do. Are we going to tell people don't come into Pennsylvania, don't create jobs? No, we're not going to do that. What we should be doing is helping those folks and helping those communities, particularly if they've got high school construction costs or whatever it is, to be able to live with the growth and not complain about it, but also manage it until things even out a little bit.
There you go. But that whole not complaining thing, so not American. So not American. Sharon, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
No problem. Talk to you soon.
Sharon Ward, Executive Director, Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
To press the college bar, just talking about your mother, that is Jaguar. Wear your political t-shirt, sacred college scar.
Where common sense, reason, and community come together. The Rick Smith Show.
Human beings, just as we are having a profound impact on the atmosphere, we are having a profound impact on the oceans.
Good news. Obama creates the world's largest marine sanctuary. Bad news. Humans have wiped out half of the world's wildlife. Scientists find humans to blame in Australia's hottest year in history. Plus,
and so we should not be aligned with such people. They're just literally lying.
A major oil company joins Google in breaking up with climate-denying front group.
All of that and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Have all the climatologists whose career depends on the climate changing to keep themselves publishing articles. Yes, I could read that, but I don't believe it.
I do not believe the scientists because it is their profession, not their hobby.
And that's the climate denial movement in a nutshell. Emphasis on nut. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you tease us with some good news, and then you hit us in the head with some horrible news, as usual.
Yeah, sorry about that, but really, it's the truth. Humans have wiped out half the world's wildlife population since 1970.
We are cutting trees faster than they can regrow. We are faster than they can emitting more oceans and forests can absorb.
That's Marco Lambertini, Director General of the World on the shocking conclusion from researchers in the Living Planet Index, a long-term study that tracks more than 3,000 species of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Researchers estimate that since 1970, the overall population of animals around the world has plunged 52%. The biggest factors: human destruction of habitat and human exploitation, unsustainable rates of fishing and hunting that are depleting species faster than they can reproduce. But there is some good news. The study does say that some designated wildlife sanctuaries are actually succeeding in at least slowing down this shocking decline. And that's why it was welcome news when President Obama used his legal authority last week to expand an existing U.S. Pacific Ocean Marine Reserve, safeguarding nearly 500,000 square miles of pristine ocean habitat. It's now the world's largest fully protected marine reserve in the Pacific, according to Secretary of State John Kerry.
We're talking about an area of ocean that's nearly twice the size of Texas, and that will be protected in perpetuity from commercial fishing and other resource extraction activities like deep water mining.
Well, as much as we've been happy to criticize Barack Obama and John Kerry lately, that is good news indeed.
Yeah, and there is some more good news. New studies showing that aggressive fisheries management works if it's enacted in time. Since 2000, new congressional legislation to halt overfishing in U.S. waters has succeeded in restoring 36 U.S. fish populations from the brink of extinction, including California blue whales and Gulf red snapper. Not so great news. Australia's hottest year on record was fueled by man-made global warming, along with at least 9 extreme weather events around the world in 2013. That's according to a suite of new studies published in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. 5 research teams independently concluded that man-made global warming contributed to or amplified several extreme weather events around the world, including 5 deadly extreme heat waves. It was less clear on floods and deluges, but notably, the researchers did not rule out the role of man-made global warming in those other extreme weather events. They just said they couldn't confirm it with existing scientific methods.
And we've heard some people reporting that scientists have ruled out human-caused climate change as having anything to do with those events. These reports said they were unable to yet find hard evidence. That's different than ruling them out.
Exactly. Finally, Google is denying climate change deniers. On the Diane Rehm radio show, Google CEO Eric Schmidt announced Google is dumping its membership in the right-wing policy organization ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, because it pushes climate change denial.
Everyone understands climate change is occurring, and the people who oppose it are really hurting our children and our grandchildren and making the world a much worse place. And so we should not be aligned with such people. They're just literally lying.
Well, what took you so long, Google CEO Eric Schmidt? You could have at least Googled these guys before you gave them tens of thousands of dollars, no?
But the capper, that awkward moment when your climate change denial is too radical even for an oil company. Oil major Occidental Petroleum has announced it is also severing ties with ALEC because it doesn't want to be associated with ALEC's denial of man-made global warming.
Good news. And it should also be noted, by the way, it was a caller on the Diane Rehm show who asked Google CEO Eric Schmidt about that and pushed them to make that announcement. So if you're listening out there, keep making noise. For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website, greennews.bradblog.com. You can find us on the Facebook and the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Breaking up is hard to do. Don't take your love away from me. Don't you leave my heart in misery. If you go, then I'll be
She said, I watch him walk down Main Street, a sweet one-man parade. He'd tip his hat, and just like that, another score he'd made. I'd watch the girls, I'll watch him, malt strong for the flame. The money showed, the laughter flowed from the way he played the game. He played the game.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. The day they closed the factory down. One of my favorite songs by Harry Chapin. Not one that gets a lot of airplay, but one of my favorite ones because, you know, it tells the story of the late 70s when, you know, we were shipping jobs overseas. The 80s, man, it was pedal to the metal. You know, how many people remember that time period where all you saw were and it goes back to the Reagan high dollar policy that made imports so much cheaper. And it was impossible for companies here in the U.S. to compete. And so it gave them this idea, hey, let's go overseas. We'll produce with the cheaper labor. We'll send our stuff back here where we'll get a higher profit and we'll be happy. And it will be wonderful. And it was. Until you realize that can only go on for so long, which kind of makes me look at this new report put out by the office of Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy. One of those bittersweet moments of, you know, I've been telling you this for 9 years now. Every time we turn around, I've been saying, look, we're not making the things that we need. There are too many things that are being made overseas. And not just the toys and the trinkets and the clothes and all of the consumer goods, but the national security stuff. And we have this thing called the Berry Amendment that says our military is supposed to produce the things that it needs. Kind of a good idea. If you're going to have a war, if you're going to be a war society, if you're going to bomb people, you should at least control the factors of production, correct? You need to have a war machine if you're going to have a war machine. You need to have that manufacturing capability because, with the smart bombs that we have, they're only smart because of the chips that we get from China. Just kind of throwing that out there. And, the guided missiles are guided by magnets in the nose of the missile. This I learned a number of years back, that the last factory in the U.S. Back in 2008 was literally crated up, put on a ship and steamed over to China, where it was recreated step for step, procedure by procedure, right there in a Chinese factory. And the only thing different is the guys working on the machines. It's the same exact factory that it was here in the U.S. It's just there now. And of course, the people doing the work are making a fraction of what they were making here. And who benefited? And the question I guess you have to ask is, did we as a society, did we benefit from that? Did we get lower prices? And the answer is no. What we got were higher profits, higher CEO pay. That's what really matters. So when Chris Murphy's office put this out, that said since 2007, the U.S. Department of Defense has granted almost 275,000 waivers to the Buy American Act. You kind of go, wait a second, really? Since 2007. I would probably argue that 275,000, nearly right about almost 275,000, just from 2007 till now, just in this short span of time, the 7-year window, is probably more waivers and more than we've given away from 1933 to 2006. I would be, and I'm not a betting person. I'm not someone who gambles, but I think I'd take that bet because we've really, honestly, need help. And you go, well, what were the waivers for? Interesting. A lot of the waivers came because, well, we've got soldiers overseas, so we should produce it overseas. And the idea, I guess, when they made these exemptions is that, you had been involved in World War II, which you maybe kind of needed to buy some things, some supplies while you were there. It wasn't supposed to be, and just my thought on it. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I think I could be. You're there, you need these things now, we'll buy them, but we still have the manufacturing capability back at home. And you look at the number, the amount, these 275,000 waivers have, and sit down for this, because this is an enormous number. You're looking at almost $164 billion in tax dollars that went overseas to fund our military, to fund the things that our military needs. Now, the senator said, this is a simple concept. The United States government should give preference to American manufacturers when it purchases goods with taxpayer dollars. Duh. Really? You think? He goes, but right now that's not happening. Too many talented, hardworking manufacturers in Connecticut are out of work because the federal government isn't doing enough to prioritize American jobs when making purchases. The Department of Defense needs to step it up and put American workers first whenever possible. Do you think? I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be, a smart guy, but do you think? And, I mentioned earlier, I went to my daughter's basketball booster meeting, and I was just struck because evidently, and this is gonna kill me. I'm not really, but I'm not thrilled. Evidently, she's going to have to wear Nike basketball shoes because the entire team evidently has to have the same shoes, and they've got a deal with Nike. And I've never owned a pair of Nike. I've never worn a pair of Nikes. I don't want anything to do with Nike. But I'm going to have to give some of my money to Nike because this group has decided Nike is the best thing to do. And nobody seems to have a problem with everything being Nike, even though they make nothing here. They have never made a tennis shoe in the U.S. Ever. Their business model was based on Americans don't want to make shoes. No, Americans don't want to make shoes for pennies a pair. That's true. Americans don't want to work for nothing in sweatshop conditions. That is absolutely true. And it's kind of something I agree with. But here we are. And it makes me go, does nobody else think like this? And maybe we need to pull our head out of the sand and realize that the jobs that we're creating by our purchases are somewhere else. And that the job that we may be saving by going, hey, maybe we should buy an American-made product, maybe our own. Or am I off base here? Is this something that just maybe I'm on my own one-man crusade to say that, you know what, domestic consumption should come with domestic production? Just a thought. Especially, I mean, really honestly, truthfully, especially when you're talking about your military. Because I got to be honest, I cannot believe we've put ourselves into this situation. Now, the folks over at the Alliance for American Manufacturing, they actually wrote a book on this, and it is a massive book. And I've spent time, trying to work through it. When I get 5 or 10 minutes here, something else enrages me. There's screws or rivets or pieces for bombs or planes or guns. All of this stuff we grant waivers so someone can make overseas. And I'm going, but wait a second. If you're going to be a war society, shouldn't you make your own stuff? Shouldn't you have the capability that if tomorrow, boom, everything goes exploding, you're not scrambling to find pieces and parts? We're not going through the trash going, hey, I found one. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the one who is a little off here. Which brings me to House Resolution 1046 here in Pennsylvania, a non-binding, non-controversial resolution under Rule 35. Yeah. They think so too. And I'll just read it real quick. Recognizing November 19th, 2014, as American-Made Matters Day. American-Made Matters Day. That should have been worded differently. Here in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, whereas November 19th, 2014 has been declared as the first annual, it's not annual, it's the first American-Made Matters Day. And whereas on November 19th, 2014, consumers are encouraged to buy at least one American-made product to show their support for American manufacturing. The day will also kick off a movement encouraging Americans to buy products made in America throughout the upcoming holiday shopping season. And whereas American-Made Matters Day has been declared because of the positive impact that American manufacturing has had on jobs and its effect on local communities, the United States economy, the product safety and environment, and the future of America. And whereas the United States Bureau of Economic Analysis reports that every dollar spent on American goods invests an additional $1.35 into the U.S. economy. According to the Federal Advanced Manufacturing Portal, one new manufacturing job creates 1.6 additional jobs in the local service businesses. Jobs in high-tech manufacturing industries generate up to 5 local service jobs and demand in other industries, such as technology, supply chain management, and logistics. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Representatives recognizes November 19th as American-Made Matters Day in Pennsylvania. And I got to be honest, I argue it should be every day. Every day we should be thinking like that. And it's frustrating to me that we're not. It's frustrating to me that we've gotten to a point where, hey, hooray for me, and the heck with everybody else. And we hold up companies like Walmart, and we hold up these big multinational behemoths who, well, we drove the prices down. Yeah, but you drove the jobs away. And we look at politicians who continually, even as we know, these insane free trade agreements are literally killing this country. They're still out there pushing for what we know is a failed ideology. And that, I guess, is a problem. Because stop and think about all the failed ideologies that we've come to take as, well, that's just how it is. Like giving huge amounts of money to corporations in the hope that maybe possibly they'll consider bestowing a job on someone. I mean, that is just dumb. Catastrophically dumb. But we've been sold, oh, it's good policy, it's good business. No, it's a ripoff. Create demand. And I guess this is where fundamentally the right and the left is kind of lost. Because the right-wingers are still pushing the Reagan stuff. Reagan, the sainted one. When everybody else is going, oh, wait a second, it hasn't worked. It hasn't. Look at the Reagan years. You know what's interesting? I just read a story the other day that said that this administration, the Obama administration, is the best job-creating president in history. I mean, stop and think about it. This is the best. And I guess if you're sitting on Wall Street, if you're looking at the daily returns and you look at the number of additional billionaires created and the concentration of wealth because the top 10% has taken so much of the expansion from 2009, things are really good at the top. It's good to be in the corner office, which is why I guess the rest of us keep looking around going, I thought this was going to be better. And it hasn't been. And I think it comes back to policy. I think it comes back down to the fact that we haven't spent money on roads and bridges and putting people back to work because we know those construction jobs create economic demand. We haven't put as much money into manufacturing. Because we know, as the resolution in Pennsylvania, on November 19th is American Manufacturing Matters Day. You know, I stop and I think about this stuff. This should be just common sense. Why does it have to be and the thing that gets me is non-controversial. Of course it's non-controversial, you nimwits. Or at least it should be. But, you know, there are a bunch of names on this resolution that I didn't see. And that's what's concerning to me. I look at the Stephen Blooms. I look at the Daryl Metcalfs. I look at some of the right of the right, the Justin Simmonses. I look at the right, the extreme right of the Republican Party. And this is heresy. The free market should decide. So I find it really very, very, very strange that we have to have a resolution to tell us what I think is common sense. And I think it's really strange that we put up with almost $164 billion over the last couple of years being shipped overseas for things that our military needs. The people that we call heroes. And I got to be honest with you. If you're one of those people walking around with whatever it is that came, do you feel comfortable? You happy with the fact that the smart chips are made in China? You happy with the magnets made in China? You happy that we've seen the things that have been going on, the privatization of the supply chain? Does that make anybody warm and fuzzy? Or am I just the one who goes, there's something wrong here? And then there's the other part of it. It's the jobs. You know, it's about that brain drain. And we talked about this a little bit the other day. It only takes one generation. It takes one generation to lose the know-how. It takes one generation of kids to go, you know what? I don't want to turn that hunk of steel into something very sophisticated 100 times in a row. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the one who fixes this or invents that. It takes one generation. That's it. And the Chinese right now seem to be that generation who are going, we'll do it. Absolutely. Over here. Woohoo. So it's one of those things. We've got decisions to make. And I think November 4th, a big one of those decisions to be made. Anyway, if you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go get the podcast, Stitcher on the smartphone, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
I see them blue for me and you, and I say to myself, what a wonderful world.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. North America's building trades unions say that a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission decision means thousands of construction jobs and $40 million in additional tax revenue for Calvert County, Maryland. The commission gave final approval for the construction and operation of the Cove Point LNG project in Lusby, Maryland. The unions say it means secure employment for the next several years for over 3,000 skilled craft professionals. Building Trades President Sean McGarvey says the negotiated union agreement with Dominion Energy ensures the safest, most highly trained and skilled workers in the world will be building this project. The project's total cost is estimated at between $3.4 and $3.8 billion. McGarvey said large infrastructure projects like Cove Point create thousands of jobs and also create an economic multiplier effect for other sectors of the economy like manufacturing and services. Hundreds of union members and supporters rallied in Union City, New Jersey Tuesday, demanding that Alaris Health Management immediately reinstate about 24 1199 SEIU workers who were locked out of their jobs after a 3-day strike in mid-September. The certified nursing assistants who were locked out tried for months to negotiate a new labor contract before staging the 3-day strike. Davika Smith is one of the locked-out workers.
We've been negotiating for months for a fair contract, affordable health care, increasing our wages, and the management never wanted to come to a table with a fair contract. So we was forced to go out on strike. When we went on strike, the 3-day strike, Friday, I was, told from the management that there was no work for me. After 8.5 years of working there, I wasn't on a schedule. I went out on a legal strike, and what they did to me was illegal.
If Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker isn't labor's political enemy number one, he's very close to the top of that list for destroying collective bargaining rights for public workers in the state in 2011. He's up for re-election now after surviving a recall attempt, and the race is rated a toss-up. 2 new polls are out. One from Gravis Marketing shows Democrat Mary Burke ahead of Walker by 5 points. But a Marquette University poll released Wednesday shows likely voters favoring Walker by 5 points. The Milwaukee-based Marquette poll shows Walker up by 5 points, 50 to 45, among likely voters.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
There was a controversial remark made by a member of your legal team comparing gay marriage to the union of 12-year-olds, saying both are illegal, which you called inappropriate.
It was an inappropriate analogy. I think a much better analogy would have been brother and sister, don't you?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, I got to give the governor credit, at least if he's going to be awkward. It's worth repeating. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. And what's interesting is you think about the bizarre scandals that this administration and this guy's gotten himself into. All these porno emails that are now coming out. Turns out potentially one of the court justices, he's on the list. And at some point, and I said this about Paterno, if Corbett didn't know, he should have been fired for not knowing, because I do believe it's the head guy's job. The exact same thing applies to Corbett. But again, I go back to this, and this is why we have elections, so that we cleanse, we delete and cleanse. I still love that, and I thank the interim education secretary for that. Anyway, here to talk about the gubernatorial race, also some other things that'll pop up. I've asked Terry Madonna. He's the professor of public affairs and the director of the Center for Politics and Public Affairs at Franklin and Marshall College. Terry, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks as always.
So, what do you think of this email situation? Is it the right thing for Kathleen Kane to bring them out? I'm curious your thought.
Yeah, well, it seems to me that that if the Attorney General wants to release them, and remember that after the judge said that they were not part of the grand jury process, at least the part that was to be remain private, that it was up to her. She had some options. She didn't have to release them. I mean, I think she would have faced right to know, continued right to know barrage by the press to get them. But I think once you go down that line, you just can't selectively pick 8, and that's what she did initially. Now we know, of course, there are other people involved. You just can't pick 8 people and say, oh, by the way, we know these emails were sent to these people. We don't even know if they opened them. I mean, I think when you do something like this, you have to sit down, if you're the Attorney General, get with your people and say, if we're going to go this route, we got to have full disclosure. We can't hide behind rules and regulations. We got to have full disclosure. And if once we start this, because, she's facing the accusation that this was, politically contrived on her part. And subsequent to that, now we learn that there was an allegation now has been made that a Supreme Court Justice, Seamus McCaffrey, was involved in this. The extent we don't know. The allegation, that he received them. Governor Corbett has asked, for all of the names. I think she has no choice but to do it. I don't think it was wrong for her to release them. You got me, but not selectively.
Yeah, no, I was of the mindset if you're going to put them out, everything has to be out, because there will be that appearance of, well, she's just being political, and this is just to benefit the gubernatorial candidate of her party, which I don't know that it actually is. I just think that this is not someone who's politically savvy enough to maybe understand the field.
Yeah, well, you certainly ought to have advisors around you who are when you're in that position. I agree with you in this respect. I mean, look, Governor Corbett is 17 points behind, 16, 17 on the average of the polls. I don't like to use robocalls and internet polls, but if you take the 3 polls that, use probability sampling, I won't get into the details of this, the Muhlenberg poll, the Quinnipiac poll, and my poll, within this month, just take this month so far, the 3 of them account 1 a week, 24, 21, and 20 points behind among likely voters. So we don't need to get into the deep weeds of this, but I think everybody would agree he's double digits behind. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So what do you want the final 3 weeks of the campaign to be about? Do you want it to be about whether a cabinet officer of yours resigned? Now, he resigned not because he admitted guilt, but because he didn't want it to be a distraction from his job. He said, I can't function in this way. And I understand that. But if you're Governor Corbett in the midst of a campaign in which you're losing, do you really want to have this be the narrative? And I'm talking about the political implications.
Right.
Now, the allegation on the cabinet secretary, Abruzzo, who resigned today, Chris Abruzzo, but that, the allegation is that he received 46 of these emails and he sent 8. So, now we're going to get into parsing. Well, if you get them, and let's be honest, all of us have gotten crazy stuff in the mail that we didn't solicit, that we didn't want. Would you agree with that?
Sure, we have.
That's a name of the game. But you delete them, or if it's a list, you say, take me off the list. But you can't control what you get, but you can control what you send.
Correct.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So I can understand the perplexion with people who received them, but in this case, Abruzzo, the allegation, now he's denied this is the DEP secretary, is that he sent 8. And Frank Noonan, the police commissioner, another cabinet officer, state police commissioner, received 338 of them.
Wow.
Now, but he sent zero. You got it? Sent zero. So I just think that if you're going to go down this road, maybe this is the sort of thing that the Attorney General did, and I applaud her for this. She got an independent investigator to look at whether Tom Corbett played politics with the Sandusky investigation. We now know, as a result of the investigator, Jeffrey Moulton, independent guy, former U.S. attorney, nobody's going to doubt his credibility or his integrity. He said, yes, the process was slow, too slow, but there was no direct political connection with that. Credit to the Attorney General for doing that. She got a little egg on her face for that. I think everybody would agree. If you're going to do this, maybe this is another thing that you should have gotten because of the implications of this. I've heard reports as many as 80 people on this list, not on it, but who got these things.
Right.
It's not illegal as far as we know.
Nope.
It did not involve child porn. But do we want government officials using government servers? Let's forget what they should do on their own time with their own money for the moment. But obviously, that's not something that anyone could say is the right thing to do.
Yeah. No, and I look at it this way. I mean, you brought up the police commissioner who didn't send any. My first thought is at least he was smart enough not to. If he did get them and open them, he's got to be at least smart enough not to send them on. And if he did, I would have to think he wasn't all that bright to begin with. Knowing
well, you're right. I mean, you're talking about law enforcement officials at the highest level who got this stuff. And, you got to say, okay, you better not open them, dude, right? You better not do that.
Couldn't you get a Yahoo account? I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, here's the point. I think in one of the cases involved with the person, they said they were on his Comcast account, not his. But now here's another question, and it's a tougher one. Should you be sending and receiving pornographic email on your own account if you're a high official? Let's say you're a Supreme Court justice. Let's say you're a high-ranking prosecutor. Let's say you're a lawmaker. Where does privacy? You see where this is a little more. Now we're into a little touch. You know what I mean? A little more.
Well, absolutely, because I'm someone who's going to say they should be allowed as long as it's their own computer, it's their time. That's none of my business.
Right.
What you do within
as long as you're not breaking the law.
Absolutely.
I think you agree with that.
What consenting adults do in the confines of their own four walls with their resources, I don't have a say, nor should we have a say.
Yep.
But when you're the ones who are pointing the fingers down saying, we're telling you how to do things, that's just my thought on it. I did want to move on to something else. This Scott Wagner letter has just it's gotten me chuckling, but it's also got me thinking some crazy stuff. It looked like at first blush a public tantrum. They won't talk to me. They won't ask my opinion, and it just seemed very for a guy I think who is kind of a bully. It just seemed like a public temper tantrum.
Here's the problem. I mean, Scott Wagner gets elected in a district in New York, and he runs as a complete outsider. He's going to change the culture and lifestyle. Here's the problem. He gets into a legislative body with 50 people, 23 Ds, 27 Rs. They have a process. They're institutionalized way of doing things. He's not comfortable with that process. You and I both know, what do we say about the legislative process? It's the sausage. It's ugly.
Yep.
Would you agree? It's
Absolutely.
sausage making and it's ugly. And so all of a sudden, he's not the entrepreneur of his own business. He's now one of 50 and a junior member of the 50. And all of a sudden, if the leaders aren't paying attention to him and not doing what he wants to be done, he gets offended by it. And if he thinks they're not moving the state in the direction he wants it to, I'll tell you something that he did that is not, I don't think, widely known. When he came into office, the first thing he did was to introduce a resolution to take the pictures, the portraits of several former members of the legislature who ended up in leadership positions such as former Speaker John Purcell, former Speaker Bill DeWeese, and way back when, in the 1970s, another speaker named Herb Feinman, and a minority leader in the Senate. So we've got two basically we have a couple of Democrats and a Republican. He wanted those portraits taken down.
Yeah, and I thought that was a masterful political move.
Yeah. And so you know what happened as a result of that, which was really odd? To assuage him, they put these little metal platelets below the portrait that describes what they did. Like,
wow, that's even worse than taking
blah,
them down.
And convicted of public corruption. So I go into the Capitol one day and I'm looking at this and I go, oh my gosh, would you, if I were the former speaker, if I were John Purcell or Bill DeWeese, I'd say, please take the portrait down. I don't want people going through on the tours reading that.
Exactly.
It's worse.
That's what
You're
I said.
right.
It's even worse. It was masterful, though. I give him credit for that.
I mean, but it shows you as a freshman. Now, you know, be seen but not heard.
Right.
You know, you don't want to get in there. He does, you know, there's seniority. I mean, maybe that's not always 100% the way the legislature should function. But you and I both know, you've covered this for a long time. You know that you're not going to go in and push your own party's leaders around and demand here and demand there. That's not the way. There's seniority. There's respect for people who are chairs of committee. It's just the way it functions.
Especially in the upper chamber.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. Even more so in the Senate. You're exactly right about that.
And then I got to ask the question. There's two questions that go with this. Will he get the absolute cold shoulder when he gets back? And the other part of it is the more the part of it that makes me, the even more jaded part of me goes, is this something that maybe the speaker was behind?
No, I don't think so. I mean, in the Senate, I mean, here's what happened. After he sent the letter privately to the majority leader, Dominic Pileggi, a Republican from Delaware County. And Pileggi did something that surprised a lot of us Harrisburg observers. He circulated it in the caucus.
Right.
In other words, he took a private letter and circulated it. Now, you know, then there were subsequent responses out of others in the Senate defending Pileggi. So, in a sense, you got to think that Wagner is going to be something of a pariah, right? You can't think that doing this publicly is going to help him in his quest to get his legislation through, or in his request for, you know, the kind of collegiality that's supposed to exist. I mean, normally we see a lot more of this Democrat to Republican, given the partisanship and the polarization. You don't often, you did see it a bit with the Tea Party advocates and types who went into the legislature and into Congress. You know, they would often get on their more moderate leaders, or what I call establishment Republicans, pretty fiercely so.
Right,
I mean,
but isn't that what this is? I mean, I got to be honest.
In a sense, although he's not directly connected. You know, I'm not going to disagree with that. No, I will agree. Much of what the Democrats went through during coming out of the Vietnam War era, when a lot of the people who were elected, you know, were anti-Vietnam, and then you had the Johnson wing of the party, and, you know, they went at it pretty much in the same way. But I don't think, I mean, imagine this, if you're Tom Wolf, let's assume, this is a hypothetical, I'm not predicting this. If Tom Wolf gets elected and he's got to go in there, imagine the nightmare of trying to work this out. How are you going to work this out? How are you going to work with, now you've got Republicans in the Senate fighting. You got House Republicans that aren't on the same page. You got Democrats and Republicans that are beyond partisan and polarized. I mean, it's you got to look at this and go, oh my gosh, who would want this job?
And that's what I've asked him personally. Why would you want it, knowing the complexity? And that's where I keep saying at some point the electorate has to make an ideological decision and maybe expel some of these extreme forces, like a Scott Wagner, who has turned into being one of the most extreme there so far. Last question I've got for you. During the debate, the Corbett people said that the culture comment by the Democrat Wolf was a cheap shot. You think it was a cheap shot?
You mean the one where he said you're cooking the books?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think he didn't mean it in quite the way that the governor responded by saying, you're accusing me of criminal act. I mean, cooking the books in a sense, I mean, I don't know that I would have used that term. I mean, I might have, who knows what we'd say in the middle of a debate. But I mean, I think the point he was trying to make, and by the way, Rendell did the same thing, is that use a lot of one-time gimmicks, moving monies around in the budget that they know will be gone. They borrow money early. Rendell had to do that. I don't know that I would use the expression cooking the books. Do I think that, and I watched it, I mean, I don't know what was in Tom Wolf's mind. I don't think he meant he was doing anything illegal. You know what I mean? I think he was saying, you can play all these budgetary games with gimmicks. It's not illegal to do it. It's just patching up a more serious deficit problem. You follow me?
Yep.
That's the issue here, that the state has, not putting up its fair share for education. That, there are things that Wolf's arguing and Corbett's disagreeing with him about what should be funded and how they should be funded. And I think that goes to the heart of the matter. So I don't think Tom Wolf was accusing him of illegality. I mean, it may sound like that when you say cooking the books to a prosecutor. He may have a different interpretation of what that. But I think he meant just doing budget gimmicks. But then when he explains and he gets into it with one-time transfers of money and borrowing money, I mean, that's not illegal. But I could see, how the governor might react that way. But I don't think that's what Tom Wolf meant.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why November 4th, I think, is so important. And I encourage everyone to get out and vote, right?
I tell my students, register early, get out and vote. In Philly, we used to say vote early and vote often, but that's only a joke for all your people. It's only a joke. Vote once, but get out and vote. You're exactly right.
There you go. G. Terry Madonna, I appreciate you taking time for us. I'd love to have you back again sometime real soon.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As he leaves American soil, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will return home triumphant. He's increased his public image and raked in billions of foreign investment dollars from U.S. corporations. Such investment will boost the Indian economy, but the AIDS advocacy group Health Gap says that for the good of many around the world, the U.S. should refrain from interfering with the Indian pharmaceutical industry.
India is now the center, really, of the production of low-cost, high-quality generic AIDS drugs for people living with HIV around the world.
Matthew Kavanaugh is a senior policy analyst with Health Gap.
In the U.S., a year's worth of first line or second line, kind of some of the newer AIDS drugs can cost you upwards of $15,000 to $20,000. In India, they're being produced now for $95 per patient per year. So we've seen more than 99% reduction in the cost of drugs by making them generically.
Kavanaugh says Modi is facing major pressure from U.S. drug makers, unhappy with the way public health considerations factor into Indian patent law, and they want more restrictions on generic suppliers. If Modi caves to that pressure, AIDS patients and their loved ones could be hard hit.
If the changes in the laws mean that Indian companies are no longer allowed to make all of these really important drugs, then actually it's really hard to see where we might look to. There's some important industry in Latin America, South Africa, there's some more important industry in Egypt, but none of whom have the scale and quality that exists in the Indian marketplace. It's ironic because one of the signature foreign policy initiatives of the United States government has been the response to HIV. All of that would be massively undermined if the United States government itself wasn't able to buy low-cost generic HIV drugs from India and import them into countries in Africa.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
We've been talking about President Teddy Roosevelt's fight to save the American sport of football from being outlawed. After the 1904 season, the president called a meeting of the major college football programs to change some rules to prevent deaths, injuries, and violence. Virtually nothing new happened, and the president's son was injured as a freshman player at Harvard. At the end of the school year, Stanford and Cal switched from football to rugby, and Columbia, Northwestern, and Duke dropped their football programs. Harvard's president wrote that he considered football to be more brutalizing than prize fighting, cockfighting, or bullfighting. President Roosevelt dug in even deeper than the previous year. He wrote to a friend that he hoped to minimize the danger without football having to be played, in his words, on too ladylike a basis. Join us again for the president's efforts and suggestions. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
It's not enough. You always need a little more man, a little more seed. It's not enough. It's not enough. What it is.
Interesting conversation there with G. Terry Madonna.
I gave you cash. I gave you
You know, that point of the upper chamber. I mean, that is so important. I mean, understand how they were set up. I mean, the rages, the passions of the people were supposed to be in the House, which is why they have the shorter term, so that you can get more people in and out, and that's where the craziness is supposed to happen. So when you see the House erupt and you see all kind of insanity, that's supposed to happen. When you get to the Senate, you're supposed to be a little more refined, a little older. If you understand our Constitution, it says you got to be a little bit older to be a senator than to be in the House. You're supposed to have a little more sophistication, a little bit more of a statesman-like quality. So when you see someone like Scott Wagner come in, who's, in my view, look, just a bully. He's used to getting his own way. He's used to snapping his fingers and everybody jumping. And the other part of this, he's used to those guys jumping. Because they come to him for money. And, he's used to a very different dynamic. I got to think, though, this is going to be one of those moments where a very rude awakening doth occur. I do think that there are going to be some cold shoulders. Now, as I was talking to a friend today, Wagner was this is a really well thought out plan that he had concocted, because evidently he's been whining and dining a number of the members of the Senate, trying this almost like a coup attempt in his own party to get the current majority leader out and to sneak him into leadership. And the way this friend of mine was explaining is, he was making headway, but he may have overcalculated his hand. And, it's going to be an interesting couple of years. But Terry Madonna's right. It's going to be, let's say Tom Wolf does win. What do you do when you have the opposition and really a good strength in extreme opposition against you? And how do you get things done? This is going to be the interesting dynamic. Because I don't know, while I like Tom Wolf, I don't know he's the gamesman that Rendell was. Rendell used to love to throw stuff out there and get everybody fighting each other, and he'd come out smelling like a rose. I don't know that Wolf is that guy. I do think he's a bright guy. I think he's unflappable. I think he's somebody who's going to steadfastly work hard for people. But when you get into that meat grinder, how does it work out? And one of those things that I've often said, and Terry Madonna alluded to it as well, the process of making sausage, a lot like legislation. I've often wondered, was it a bad thing to put C-SPAN on the air so people can watch the sausage being made and all the infighting and the bickering? Because I don't know that it's ever changed. I don't know that it's ever been different. I just think it's always in our face. And I think it's always there. And every time there's a piece of legislation that doesn't stand a snowball's chance of passing, every time it pops up, man, there are groups fundraising and there are politicians out there with their sound bites and their talking points, and all of the machinery goes into hyper mode to get people all lathered up. It kind of makes you wonder if maybe the sausage is best left in the factory. It's just one of those things that I think about occasionally. But it will be interesting to see where Wagner finds himself, because Aldi Temperton, they won't talk to me. I did also find it interesting that Wagner called out Pileggi for taking money from those dreaded unions. Evidently, and what was explained to me is of the list of Republicans taking money from those dreaded unions, Pileggi is like 10th. And the person I was talking to said, can you guess who number 13 was? Tom Corbett. So, I find it interesting that the Republicans point their finger and it's those dreaded unions and that, and yet they're more than happy to take the workers' money. So very, very interesting to me. But it is exactly what it is. Let's take a quick break. Right back.
Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
January of 1964 was a time to remember for many Americans. The Beatles released their first album. New York announced plans to build a World Trade Center. The Surgeon General announced smoking kills, and President Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty during his first State of the Union address. January 1964 was also a momentous year for the American truck drivers. The nation's truckers saw the first nationwide labor contract. The National Master Freight Agreement, covering some 450,000 truck drivers employed by 16,000 companies across the country, set a nationwide minimum wage of $3.33 per hour, or $23.63 in 2008 dollars, as well as providing health care and retirement benefits for all its members. The 1964 National Master Freight Agreement set a nationwide standard for working conditions, giving drivers a voice on the job and the power to stand up to abusive treatment, and eventually the ability to refuse to drive equipment the driver deemed unsafe. Led by labor visionary James R. Hoffa, this victory was the crowning achievement of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters as one of America's most influential unions. This landmark agreement created a framework for all national contracts to follow. Jimmy Hoffa, the man who famously quipped, "I may have many faults, being wrong is not one of them," was certainly right about the benefits, power, and influence of such a national agreement for workers, both union and non-union. Wages and benefits earned by truck drivers brought millions of hardworking men and women solidly into the middle class by rewarding hard work with a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. For generations, the National Master Freight Agreement served as the industry standard for all truck drivers, raising wages, improving benefits, and providing a safer workplace for drivers and the motoring public. Unfortunately, since the 1980 passage of trucking deregulation, the industry has resorted to cutthroat competition based on who is willing to work for less. In this environment, the National Master Freight Agreement has lost some of its power in lifting truck drivers out of low wage, no benefit, and hazardous conditions. Currently, many non-union truck drivers are earning at or near poverty wages while pushing legal limits. For many truckers, their pay is solely determined by the number of miles they drive. Breakdowns, time spent waiting to be loaded and unloaded, and other delays are shouldered by the driver, in most cases without compensation. 1964 and the years that followed has shown what can be accomplished by workers standing together. Perhaps the future will see resurgence in worker solidarity and the reemergence of a fair day's work, a fair day's pay. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment is brought to you by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, go to www.thericksmithshow.com.
We're going to start in a couple of weeks with our budget adjustment bill. The first step is we're going to deal with collective bargaining for all public employee unions, because you divide and conquer.
and conquer, are we? We'll take them out. We'll take those workers out. That's from the same clip of who he's talking to is the billionaires. Diane Hendricks made her multi-billions with construction supply companies. And a lot of public contracts, a lot of taxpayer dollars went into that. But that doesn't matter. Later in that same clip, she does this whole tingly in the panties, kind of, when are we going to get right to work? Very strange video. I suggest you look it up. But it shows, what do these folks want? Oh, they want power. It's not about the money. This woman's a billionaire a number of times over. There's nothing, literally nothing she cannot buy, except complete and total, absolute control and fear. I mean, that's the aphrodisiac. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Today in labor history, October 2nd, the year 1934, the American Federation of Labor officially endorsed a campaign that called for a 6-hour day, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, a 30-hour work week. Wow. Back when labor pushed for something progressive. Good for them. Also on this day in 1949, some 400,000 coal miners already on strike were joined by 500,000 steel workers closed down the nation's foundries, steel mills, and iron mills, demanding pensions and better wages and working conditions. Also on this day in the year 2007, Starbucks Workers Union baristas at an outlet in East Grand Rapids, Michigan, organized by the Wobblies, won their grievances after the National Labor Relations Board cited the company for violations of labor laws, including threatening union activists. And today, back in 2010, was the One Nation Working Together rally in Washington, D.C. More than 200,000 people, of which I was one, along with my oldest daughter. We went to the big march. It was one of those amazing days of solidarity and a show of strength. Sad reality is not much came out of it afterwards. It kind of broke up, and I would have liked to have seen more come out of that. But it is that kind of show of solidarity. So it moves us to today. And if you saw the story yesterday over at the Huffington Post, Dave Jamieson, the labor reporter over there, wrote a great piece on this worker in Michigan who had the audacity to think that they could be part of the Fast Food Forward campaign and begin to organize for a union at the Burger King. Oh, can't do that. Here's what happened. And Dave does a nice job of the piece. This worker, how dare they, thought that they could go to work and talk to their coworkers at the job and have them fill out forms and stuff. They were disciplined, written up for soliciting and violating the company's policy on solicitation and loitering. That was one part of this. Another part of it was evidently they disciplined someone for not putting the pickles on the hamburger properly. That's got to be done in a perfect square. No circle pickles. Everything's got to be in a square. And the National Labor Relations Board, there on Monday, a judge for the NLRB ruled that this Burger King franchisee was in violation of a number of different labor laws, and with their union busting thoughts of disciplining people for not putting pickles on and for talking to workers during work at work. And the ruling was pretty straightforward. That this company violated these workers' rights. And as I'm reading through this story, you go, only the most hardcore of people would put up with this nonsense. They have made it virtually impossible for the average everyday worker to organize. They've made it virtually impossible for people to stand up for their rights without having to go through all this. because the person who didn't put the pickles on right, they sent home. So you're going to be disciplined by not being able to work the rest of the day. So they had to come to work. They had to spend all the money to get to and from work, and they only got, maybe half of the day's pay. Now, for the penalty of violating the law, and this is where it's just obscene. So for the penalty of jeopardizing these people's jobs, putting the fear into everybody, because I got to argue that this would have a chilling effect across the entire workplace. For this, they had to pay the 2 hours that the worker was sent home and promise not to do it again. And then promise to update their solicitation and loitering policy to actually follow the law. That's the punishment. When they know exactly, look, this is stuff that union busters tell these employers to do all the time. So what? You break the law. There are no teeth there. And this is why I keep saying, look, at some point, these big corporations have to be held accountable, and these union busters have to. One of the things that I find interesting is that this Burger King franchisee, I guess they own like 22 restaurants in and around Detroit. The corporate head said, well, it's nothing. We've got nothing to do with it. And as Dave Jamieson writes, they sent him an email saying that Burger King Corporation does not make scheduling, wage, or other employment-related decisions for the franchisees. They are independently owned and operated 100% of all of them. And I look at what Jerry Brown did on Sunday that said no longer can you, in California, fall back on that. So I got to ask the question, should this not be something we should be pushing for across the Commonwealth here and across the country, to stop allowing these huge corporations to get away with, well, that's just them over there. It's not our problem or our fault. The other part of it is the broken nature of our labor law. The fact that you can threaten somebody, I mean, really very much terroristic threats. And the only thing that comes of it is that you have to put up a notice to promise you won't do it again. Now, stop and think about this for a second. These workers have said, you know what? We have the right to join and form a union. We have the right to concerted action. We have the right for the process of collective bargaining to talk to each other about wages and conditions. And the workplace is the appropriate place to do it. Now you've got this union busting employer who's doing everything that they can do to put roadblocks in the way of that, to stall the process of these folks talking to each other. And there's really nothing legally, because of the changes to the law, thanks to our Republican friends and some conservative Democrats, that these people can do other than go through this long, arduous process, a year-long process of going through the NLRB and hoping for a square decision, instead of having more proactive policy making and saying, look, at the end of the day, workers have a right in this country to organize and join unions. That is the law of the land. All of these roadblocks, all of these barriers, all of these harassment points, these are things that we need to be looking at on how you break these down. Because what we've chosen the rights of a handful over the rights of everyone else. And if we're going to say in this country, workers have a right to collective bargaining and to collective action, there have to be laws that protect them. Because look, all you've got to do is see one of these workers taking that kind of abuse, and everybody else goes, I can't do that. I don't have the resources. I don't have the patience. I don't have the time. And what you end up with is employers who know this, and they know that they're going to be able to harass and intimidate and get a few people to turn away. And what's interesting to me is you look at an industry, especially the fast food industry, where the average CEO is paid like 1,200 times what the average worker is paid. And you go, this is a place where unions are most desperately needed, where working conditions are most desperately needed for improvement. There was a study done, I think it was last year, that said that 9 out of 10 fast food workers, 9 out of 10, 90%, are the victims of wage theft. And, you know, as we talked about the other day, wage theft is much, much worse in the amount lost than all of the other criminal forms of theft that have been convicted. I mean, stop and think about that. When you're looking at, we've caught all of these people. In fact, not just worse, but 3 times worse. So your employer stealing from you is 3 times worse than anybody stealing from him or anybody. Armed robbery, bank robbery, convenience stores, high carjackings, whatever. All that added up is 1/3 of what regulatory bodies have been able to recover in wage theft. That's not saying that's all the wage theft. I would probably argue that's the tip of the iceberg, because those are the only cases that were won. So when I look at this, you know, there's an awful lot here. There's an awful lot for us to think about and to really start beginning to be the ones who stand up and say no more. Because I think everybody wants the same thing. You want to go to work, you want to earn a decent day's pay, you want to be able to go home and support your family, and you don't want to be harassed, you don't want to be intimidated, you don't want all of this. You didn't put the pickles on the burger in a perfect square? Really? And this goes back to what I've always said. You know, they can fire you. You can be fired for any reason. And I just got into this argument with a guy last weekend who said, well, you know, because this place where I work on the weekend, and I take a road trip every now and then, and I enjoy it. It's good therapy for me. The driving just kind of helps clear my mind. I'm kind of sadistic. But the guy says, no, the company said that when they put the cameras in, they can't discipline us for them. I'm going, really? I find it incredibly hard to believe that they would put that in writing voluntarily. Honestly, I find it impossible to believe that if they catch you doing anything. What if you're texting while driving? It's almost a felony now for a truck driver to text while driving. I know it's like a $1,500 fine. What if they catch you doing that? Well, no, they can't fire you. I'm going, I don't know. What if they catch you, drinking alcohol or who knows what? Are you going to tell me that being there? Oh, sorry, can't fire for that. It's nonsense. And then, they don't even have to fire for what's on the camera. They can just make anything else up, like the fact that you didn't put the pickles square on the bun, which is very just one of those things why I am a supporter of the National Labor Relations Board. I wish it were stronger. I wish the act were stronger. I wish we would go back to the original intent, the way Robert Wagner had written it, and the rest of them, the way it was passed. That you sign a card, you appoint a representative body or agent, and you negotiate. That's simple. All of this other stuff, it's just stalling, delaying, gridlocking, and making choke points for harassment. That's simple. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
A union man for the firefighters, my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, all down the line. This is a union town, all down the line. And if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, all down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg.
Question: is making higher education available to every American more important to our national interest than letting Wall Street profiteers make a few more billions of dollars each year? Answer: of course. Yet, our political leaders, pushed by Wall Street lobbyists, have been making the opposite choice for years. As a result, Banksters have loaded students down with a mountain of high-interest loans, rising from just over $2 billion a decade ago to nearly $1 trillion last year. Worse, the financiers, either banks or government lenders, have become the gatekeepers of advanced education, shutting out thousands of young people wanting to get ahead but not able to hurdle the formidable financial barrier. This is enormously costly to America and completely unnecessary. The smart choice, as we learned from the GI Bill after World War II, would be to make college and professional training free. Universal access to higher education, i.e. free access, produces a very high return on the public's investment while also producing a widely shared prosperity and a broadly educated citizenry. Of course, an upfront investment in a smarter, more productive, more democratic civilization is pricey. So where do we get the money to do what America needs? Get it from where it went. Wall Street's super-rich speculators are now making millions of super-fast robotic financial transactions per second, generating trillions of dollars a year for them, but producing nothing of real value for us, while distorting and endangering markets. This is Jim Hightower saying, put a tiny tax on each of those automated gambles by speculators, and more than enough money will come into the public coffers to free up higher ed for all. For information, check out United States Students Association at www.usstudents.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Organizing America 3 hours each night. The Rick Smith Show.
I tip my hat to the new Constitution. Take a bow for the new revolution. Slide free, let the change all around. Pick up my guitar and play, just like yesterday. Then I'll get on my knees and pray.
Ah, there are jobs everywhere. It's raining jobs. There are jobs everywhere. The more jobs governor. I'm still stuck on this. I'm stuck on the 220,000 jobs that are out there online, and you know, all of the 220,000 jobs that he created are more jobs governor created. It's I think it's the biggest number he knows. It's probably the best I can come up with at this point. That's about it. It's just one of those moments. And I still haven't heard back from the I retweeted back to the monster.com people who tweeted to me and said they've got jobs for me. They know it. And I gotta wonder one of two things. Are they shilling for Corbett? Are they following? Did they follow this? Came up with it on the Twitter. Had their filters set to look for that, or is it just anytime you mention job that they've done such a great job of spying on what we're saying? That soon, hey, we got one. If you're looking for one, just seemed very odd. Anyway, welcome back to the program. So our stat of the day, and this is something we talked about a couple of days ago. The general public is in the developed world, according to a new survey from 2012, highlighted data in the Harvard Business Review, shows that the American people would like to see, and the people around the world would like to see a smaller gap between the CEO class, the global investor class, and the rest of us. The ideal gap, well, no public in any of the 16 major nations surveyed wanted to see the CEOs make over 9 times what the workers receive. So, I mean, this is what they're saying. They would like to see CEO pay no more than 9 times. Think about this. Where here in the U.S., it's over 354 times. What did workers here in the U.S. say the ideal gap between CEO and worker pay? 6.7 times. What's interesting is think about the average CEO of a fast food restaurant. 1,200 times. I mean, that's almost, well, that's more than 3 years. That's, oh my gosh, that's staggering. I mean, you're talking about, wow, 12, if you work one day, if the CEO works one day, you've got to work 1,200 days. I mean, think about that. That is amazing. And yet we seem to be perfectly fine with it. Because, you know, they work hard, don't you know? Not like the person at the fast food window doesn't work hard. And the thing that's interesting, if you go back and you read through the survey, most Americans think it is a lot closer than it actually is. When I tell people that the average CEO makes, 354 times that of the average worker, they don't believe it. No, that can't be possible. And as I've always said, I think it's because we don't see those folks. We've segregated ourselves into our little pockets to where the people around us, our circle of friends, the people that we know are kind of like us. We're all in that one little socioeconomic little bubble, and we think everybody's like us. When I was a poor kid, when I was poor growing up in the projects, thought everybody was like us. Thought everybody was broke. Thought that's how things just were. And my kids, who've never missed a meal and never gone to the cabinets and found nothing there, that's how they think things are. So when you start looking at just your little world, your reality is how I think most people see the rest of the world. And I guess I've been fortunate that I've been able to see all different socioeconomic worlds. I know some wildly wealthy people, and I know some very, very poor people. In fact, I was one at one point. Don't ever think I'll be one of the wildly wealthy. I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could live in the world where people are pampering you constantly. I'm somebody who carries my own bag. And I still struggle. We go to Union hotels all the time, and I gotta consciously remember, okay, I gotta have the bellhop take because that's their job, and I gotta, honestly and truthfully, what I do most of the time, I just tip the bellhop and carry my bag anyway, which is kind of funny, but it is what it is. But I think most people, we see things, much like the world that we live in. So we're not seeing how bad it is out there. And when you start hearing the Corbett frame of, there's 220,000 jobs out there, unless you've been really affected by it. And I've been fortunate in doing this job that I've run into people who, they go, I used to think, the unemployed people were really lazy because there are jobs out there. We're told they're there. But I've been looking for a year, too. I've been looking for 3-4 years now, trying to find what I had. I now have all these crummy jobs, a bunch of part-time jobs. But I don't have that one like I had before the Bush recession. My income has gone significantly down. I'm working harder. And we hear all of these stories. And look, all of the surveys are out there. All of the studies are out there that basically lay this right out. We know this to be the case. That while there may be jobs out there, they're not jobs that you're going to be able to make a living on. I'm sorry, minimum wage is not a living job. $9 an hour is not a living wage job. I'm just sorry. And you got to have a job that's going to have health care or pensions and some type of health and retirement security as well. To me, that's the living part of the job. And this is where I think policy first helps, but more importantly, that call that the fast food workers want, the ability to sit down and bargain, the ability to sit down and contract, which that is really the America. You hear the right wing talk about the liberty of contract, which basically means if you're desperate enough, in their world, if you're desperate enough to work in horrible conditions for no money, you should be allowed. But if you say we're not going to work, we're going to withhold our labor, and only when you negotiate with us will we work. No, that can't do that. That would be horrible. That would be bad. Because then you can't make your own deal. And what they actually mean is then you can't make your own bad deal. Which is exactly what they're hoping for. So I find it rather interesting. It just is what it is. Again, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
And said I was once like you, and I used to protest too. But the powers that be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. North America's building trades unions say that a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission decision means thousands of construction jobs and $40 million in additional tax revenue for Calvert County, Maryland. The commission gave final approval for the construction and operation of the Cove Point LNG project in Lusby, Maryland. The unions say it means secure employment for the next several years for over 3,000 skilled craft professionals. Building Trades President Sean McGarvey says the negotiated union agreement with Dominion Energy ensures the safest, most highly trained and skilled workers in the world will be building this project. The project's total cost is estimated at between $3.4 and $3.8 billion. McGarvey said large infrastructure projects like Cove Point create thousands of jobs and also create an economic multiplier effect for other sectors of the economy, like manufacturing and services. Hundreds of union members and supporters rallied in Union City, New Jersey Tuesday, demanding that Alaris Health Management immediately reinstate about 24 1199 SEIU workers who were locked out of their jobs after a 3-day strike in mid-September. The certified nursing assistants who were locked out tried for months to negotiate a new labor contract before staging the 3-day strike. Davika Smith is one of the locked-out workers.
We've been negotiating for months for a fair contract, affordable health care, increasing our wages, and management never wanted to come to a table with a fair contract. So we was forced to go out on strike. When we went on strike, the 3-day strike, Friday, I was told from the management that there was no work for me. After 8.5 years of working there, I wasn't on a schedule. I went out on a legal strike, and what they did to me was illegal.
If Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker isn't labor's political enemy number one, he's very close to the top of that list for destroying collective bargaining rights for public workers in the state in 2011. He's up for re-election now after surviving a recall attempt, and the race is rated a toss-up. 2 new polls are out. One from Gravis Marketing shows Democrat Mary Burke ahead of Walker by 5 points. But a Marquette University poll released Wednesday shows likely voters favoring Walker by 5 points. The Milwaukee-based Marquette poll shows Walker up by 5 points, 50-45, among likely voters.
Workers Independent News is brought to you by the American Federation of Teachers and its 1.6 million members working to reclaim the promise of public education, health care, and public services for our students, their families, and our communities. More information online at aft.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Every now and then I visit an elementary school. Talking with children is a pretty good idea, I think. They ask questions we don't think about, and they ask them very directly. Recently, a little girl wanted to know, what's the hardest part of your job? That got me thinking. I looked down and I told her, the hardest part is telling people no.
It would have been nice to ask if the little girl would have asked, okay, the hardest part is saying no. Then I guess she didn't have a problem saying no to me having a nurse in my school, or, oh, heaven forbid, a guidance counselor, or one of those archaic things called a librarian. Maybe that was too hard to say. every time I play that clip, it makes my head want to explode. Because he didn't seem to have a problem saying no to the education. He didn't seem to have a problem saying no to 41,000 low-wage workers who got booted off of adult basic, or 89,000 kids who got booted off of CHIP, or the 70,000 of our Commonwealth's most vulnerable of the most vulnerable when he eviscerated the general assistance budget. Didn't have a problem saying no to them. Now, did he? So the question I have is, who exactly does he have a hard time saying no to? I think we could probably guess the drillers and the charter school people. I mean, I look at what's going on in New York right now, makes me think this is, and I hope I'm wrong, that this is the last hurrah. They see this as an opportunity to, hey, one last privatization, one last bit of the public largesse for our profit. I hope I'm wrong, but we shall see. Here to talk a little bit about what's going on there. And he's written really a great article on what's going on in the New York School District titled "When All Else Fails, Cash In." I've got Steven Singer. He blogs over at Gadfly on the Wall, blog.wordpress.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Steven Singer's name. Steven, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick.
So,
it's so nice that, to have an actual teacher talking about education on the air.
I'm sorry that we're done. We're done. I can't do that. Can't do it.
It's the case. I mean, if you turn on the TV or the radio or whatever, a lot of conversations about education. You'll have a bureaucrat, you'll have someone from the media, a politician, but an actual teacher. Well, I don't know where we must all be in class.
Yeah, it's like the time the Republicans held the committee hearing, ISA, and the rest of them held the committee hearing on contraception and didn't have any women.
Exactly.
Kind of reminds me of the exact same thing. So, as an educator, you look at what's been going on the last couple of years. They've gutted funding, laid off tens of thousands of education professionals. I guess you're doing just fine. Things are wonderful, huh?
Oh, not at all. I mean, we're kind of hanging by a thread here, to be honest. I mean, it's been really hard. Normally, you don't see such an effect when a governor comes takes the lead. I mean, I was staggered by what happened whenever this started and Governor Corbett suggested cutting public education the way he did. I think people just shrugged and said, "Oh, this is never going to happen. There's no way." And what we're seeing is, it just boggles the mind.
And radical change. And what I've been saying, Stephen, and maybe you can help me and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I've got to, and maybe I'm just too jaded, but I look at this as there had to be a crisis created. They had to make things look so bad that the alternative of these charter schools that aren't doing any better, and in a lot of cases are actually doing worse, would be the preferential alternative to the destroyed local public schools. That's the way I've taken it. Create the crisis and then profit from it.
You're not jaded at all, Rick. You're just paying attention. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. The first thing to do is they cut $1 billion from public education. And then keep in mind, it's not from every school that was affected as much. It was the poorer schools that were affected the most.
Correct.
So then when these poorer schools, they're already struggling to begin with, when they can't cope with this loss of funding, we blame the school for stumbling. The school then, increases class size, they cut the arts, services, and then we blame the school for not being able to handle that. And then on top of that, you say, well, we have a solution. It's to privatize. We're going to privatize the school, and then when you do that, there's all these profits that suddenly appear. The quality of education goes down, but you get ka-ching, ka-ching, all these profits, and that's really what it's about. I can't stand it when you have these gas bags come out and say, "Oh, it's all about quality of education for kids." There's nothing to do with that. It makes no sense. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, like what's happening in New York. The idea is that they're going to fire all the teachers and then rehire them at a lower rate.
Right.
You're going to lose your best teachers when you do that. Any teacher who would have an alternative would go to greener pastures. The ones you'll have left are the ones that don't have an alternative. So that's going to reduce the quality of education, not increase it. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, what do you say to this then? Because, I get that argument, but if you end up then destroying all of the school districts and they're all desperate, eventually the teachers have to go somewhere and teach if they're all bad condition. Because, I've got a friend who is a retired teacher, taught back in the late 50s and 60s. And she said, when we were begging, basically, little Johnny and Susie to bring us an apple for lunch because we couldn't afford to buy one on our own. Everybody loved us. But as soon as we wanted to buy our own apple and maybe, oh, heaven forbid, a pear, that's when things started to get a little dicey. And it's really when teachers started to say, look, we're professionals and we are training the most important resource that this country has, the next generation. We should be treated like professionals. That's when this attack on these folks began.
There's this pernicious vilification of teachers throughout the society, and I mean, it's hard for me to understand being a teacher, but people seem to have a problem, and I don't know why. When teachers come and say, you know what, I need to make a middle class living, I need to raise a family. That we have a problem with. When it comes to the charter schools and the CEOs who are making, having mansions and yachts off of the same, public school funding, we got no problems with that. That's just good business. Like this guy from Charter School USA, the CEO of Charter School USA, this Jonathan Cagey, I think it is. He's got a yacht he calls Fishing for Schools. I'm not making this up. Fishing for Schools, where he blatantly just tells us, hey, this is where my money comes from. I sit here and I fish for schools and I reel them in, and that's how I got this big yacht. And what he does to make this money, I mean, it's staggering. It's just this side of legal. But what he does is he's one of the biggest sellers of charter school debt in the country. So what they do is they sell debt tax-free because it's technically owned by the Recovery Board. They sell debt, they run it up, they sell it, and they make hundreds of millions of dollars. He made $200 million in 3 years doing that. We've got no problem with that. But that teacher, God forbid, they make a middle-class income.
But again, I think it goes back to, it's what we see. We don't see this Jonathan Hagee running around on his yacht. We don't see the Fishing for Schools yacht going down our street. But we do see the teacher doing okay while a lot of people are struggling. And what we've been fed by our corporate controlled media is it's not the teacher, because we love you, Stephen. You're nice. It's that union that we hate.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's anything that is protection for the working man. Because, again, it's just a matter of the 1% trying to rake in as much profit as possible. The least they can possibly leave on the table for anybody who's, trying to work for a living, and just drag the rest of it, to the 1%. And the unions really are the last thing out there that does any kind of job of trying to protect people. And the unions, I mean, they're not what they were. I mean, they're trying, but I mean, they're trying to destroy what little we have left.
Right. Well, I mean, you can't. The right wing can't have it both ways. You can't have big bad unions and then unions are insignificant. You can't have both, although they like to play both cards, and they do it masterfully. But I want to go back to York for a second, because in your piece, which I highly suggest people read, just go to thericksmithshow.com and click on Steven Singer's name. It'll take you right to the article. You point out that in 2012, one of the cuts of Governor Corbett's was about $8.4 million from the York City schools budget, over 15% of their budget. And now that's just 1 year. A moment ago, you said $1 billion was cut from education. Yeah, that was the first year. And then it wasn't put back the next year. So I would argue that, having gone to second grade, that's $2 billion, and then not having it the third year, that would be a $3 billion. So we've taken over $3.5 billion out of public education over the last 3-4 years. And as you pointed out, into school districts that can least afford it.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, if you saw off two legs of a chair, it's going to fall down, and you can't blame the chair. It staggers the mind that people can't seem to figure this out. It's simple math. And the fact is, Pennsylvania really wasn't exactly super generous to begin with. I mean, school funding comes from three places. It comes from the federal government, comes from the state, comes from local taxes. And Pennsylvania's share, the state share of school funding, has not been great. We're 45th. Before this, we were 45th in the country for the amount that the state pays for public education. It was 36% of the tab. The national average is 45%, and that was before we cut all this money. So it just staggers the mind that someone could say, it's like a bully who slaps a kid with his own hands and says, "Why are you hitting yourself?"
Yeah.
I mean, we got to look at the source. The source is money. And the same people who
there
do
you
this,
go. It's money. Oh, it's money. Oh, Stephen, you can't throw money at a problem.
Exactly. Just what I was going to say, because that's what they'll say. Can't throw money at it. They don't have, whenever they put money to charter schools, that's called an investment. Whenever you put money for private schools, that's an investment. But when you're going to give money to poor kids in inner city schools, that's throwing money away, because they don't care about these kids. They don't care about them. I mean, this whole corporate education reform is classist, it's racist, and it's capitalist.
And I'm glad you hit on the racist part of it, because, I just had this conversation over the weekend about our 500 school districts and no real sense of a funding formula, and how as we continue to cut state investment in education, it actually makes the poorer districts, as you've pointed out so eloquently, even more worse off, because the more affluent districts, they're just going to raise their local property taxes, or they've got residents who are able to donate or whatever, as where the poorer ones, who tend to be minorities of one sort or another, they don't have it. So basically what we're doing is I would argue, resegregating the nation based on education, maybe not so much on race or anything else, but on who can get education and who can't.
You definitely hit it. I mean, segregation, our country is very segregated, not just Pennsylvania, but I mean, the entire country. Brown versus Board of Education, we made a lot of strides, and then, we just took all these steps back. And that, I think, is something that's being exploited here with these cuts, because because we have so many schools that service populations that have high percentages of minorities, you can easily reduce the state funding for those schools and say, oh, we're not doing it because of race, we're doing it for economic factors. But, what you're doing is you're cutting the funds for minorities, and these are people who need the most help. It's the same thing with the voter ID thing that we tried to do in Pennsylvania. We're not targeting minorities. We just want to make sure you have an ID, even though what we're actually doing is targeting minorities.
And poor people as a whole. I mean, look, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and had you put an obstacle in the way for me to have to go downtown in Cleveland to get a voter ID because we weren't on the bus route, it would have never happened. And that's what we found across the Commonwealth, was that the voter registration office may be open to get the voter ID from 9 to 3 on the second Wednesday of the month. Which, how many working people can take off to go get an ID, knowing that barrier alone would preclude people from voting?
Exactly. I mean, this was something that I started a petition whenever this was happening to fight against the voter ID thing. We got over 21,000 signatures throughout Pennsylvania, and whenever a teacher does something like this, whenever a teacher is an activist, whether it's for the people that he serves, his students or their parents or whatever, it's very dangerous, because whenever I did this, whenever I do things like this, when people would call in, you'd have people calling in saying, how dare you, as a public school teacher, go out there and try to do this kind of stuff. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you get fired. I would hear this constantly.
Yeah.
And I'm out there trying to do what I can for my kids. I mean, because this is not some sort of academic issue for me. I face these children every day. I've devoted my life to these children. You know, I come in there every day, and, you know, when I close the door, I try to, you know, close out the funding cuts, close out this corporate education reform, Common Core, this standardized testing, try to close out all that nonsense. And it's me and the kids, and I give them everything I can possibly give them so that they can learn and they can be engaged and they can, you know, get something. So for me, this is very personal, very personal. And I'm also a father. I mean, I have a daughter, you know, she's 5 years old. She just started kindergarten. Someone's got to be out there for her and for these kids. And I think that's what most teachers do. Most teachers aren't there, you know, to make a middle class living. There's lots of places you could do that. We're devoting our lives to helping the people that most need it.
And what's frustrating to me, Stephen, is what it appears that we've done in this country is we're turning the art of teaching and the craft of educating into factory work, where those little vessels known as children, we're just supposed to open their head, pour in knowledge, and stamp them out. Next, and good enough is good enough. And I got to be honest, I don't agree with it.
You're exactly right. And again, it's different for the poorer kids than it is for the richer kids. I mean, the people who are pushing this, you know, Bill Gates with the Common Core, his kids don't go to public school. President Obama, who I campaigned for and voted for, his kids don't go to public school. They don't have this stuff. They don't have to deal with that stuff. It's just the poorer kids, especially, who are impacted. The kids who are most at need of the extra help are the ones who get standardized tests. You need help? Here you go. We'll give you all kinds of standardized tests. You know, you need help? We'll give you all this test prep. You can prepare for these tests constantly. You know, you're not going to be engaged. You're not going to have any after-school tutoring. You're not going to have counseling or services or wraparound services or any of the things you really need. But we're going to give you all this stuff that, you know, just consequentially, people are making all kinds of money off of.
Yeah, and heaven forbid if you were someone like me who despised standardized tests and lost interest in them very, very quickly, because then you fall to the back of the pack. I always learned better by putting my hands on things. I was much more of an experiential learner than a sit and fill in a bubble learner. And I think most kids, especially at younger ages, are that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are very few kids that you give them the standardized test, and their eyes light up, and they go, "Oh, goody! I can't wait to fill in the bubbles." You know, I don't think I've met many of those children. You know, they want to be engaged. They want something that they can relate to their life. Yeah. And the fact is, you know, our education policy, which really does come to a large degree from the federal government, has been a failure. I mean, President Obama, with Race to the Top, it's staggering. Again, you know, we take No Child Left Behind, which was an abject failure, said, okay, we'll give them all kinds of standardized tests, and, you know, it'll somehow improve. And we doubled down on it with Race to the Top, and then bring in Common Core. All this stuff we're leaching any kind of interest, any kind of engagement out of education. We're leaving them with, you know, this bland, gray curriculum. And in some areas, you know, teachers don't even get to teach. They have to teach from a script. I mean, they're putting as many weights and chains around teachers to be creative and to engage their kids as possible. Yet they want to put as much accountability as possible on those teachers for those kids. It's staggering.
Yeah, it's back to factory work. Like I said, they're turning it into just punching the clock at the mill.
Yeah, I mean, it's factory schools. You're exactly, you know, the classrooms are almost like veal fattening pens. You know, with what they're trying to do here with this current education policy. The thing is, we have to stop doing what's stupid. You know, it doesn't take a great intellect to be able to look and see that, you know, if you do this and it didn't work, and you do this again and it didn't work, and you do it again and it didn't work, but the next time it's probably not going to work.
Right.
So stop doing it if you're trying to say the goal is to increase the quality of education.
But isn't this what charter schools, from their inception, were supposed to change? You know, as I remember, Albert Shanker, the head of the New York Federation of Teachers, came up with this idea that we should have these innovations, these laboratories of innovation that we're going to call charter schools, that have really perverted into this, but the original intent was to do things differently in different school districts and then share best practices, not trademark the best practices and then profit from them, but actually to share them. The use of taxpayer dollars should be shared across all of education. It didn't turn out that way, but I like the idea.
See, I've heard that. But it's still, even that, to me, didn't pass the smell test, because if innovation is so great, if what schools really need is the ability to innovate, why not just let all the public schools do that? Why do you give two separate school systems, and one of them you're going to take away the regulation, and you're going to let them do whatever they need to do, and the other one you're going to tighten the regulations as much as possible? If it's good for charters, why isn't it good for public schools? I don't know if you saw that there was this report that just came out yesterday for Pennsylvania. It said that $30 million in waste, fraud, and abuse for Pennsylvania's charter schools since 1997. I mean, there are some good charters out there, I have to say that, but they're few and far between.
Right. Most of them are ineffectual at best, and some of them are downright criminal. And we've talked about a number of them here on the program over the last couple of years. So let's get back to York, because it's interesting to me. They're like you brought up the Charters USA, the guy with the yacht that the tax dollars are paying for. What about the other company? What about this Mosaica? We had talked about their misadventures in Muskegon Heights, Michigan. Anything else that they've gotten their claws into?
They have a list of scandals that goes back for decades. And the one you mentioned in Michigan is probably the one that's most apt to York, because it's such a similar situation. But, I mean, if you just look at the last 10 years or so, I mean, in New Orleans, they failed to align with Lafayette Academy Charter School. They failed to align the curriculum to state standards and, provide after-school programs for kids that are below grade level, transportation, and then whenever that, which was a charter school they were running, whenever that charter school said, well, you know what, I think we want to end the contract, Mosaica charged them for early termination. And then you have, I think it was in D.C., Howard Road Academy, I believe it was, where, they're giving out copies of the standardized test to the students before the test.
Take-home test.
Great, wonderful record that this Mosaica has. And, these people, want to look at us with a straight face and say, how we're going to fix York? We're going to give it to this guy with the yacht who's making money selling debt from charter schools. Or we're going to give it to Mosaica that has a track record that looks like a skid mark. And that's going to increase the quality of education? How can you look at someone in the straight face and say that? You might as well just paint dollar signs in your eyes and admit to it. Yeah, we're doing it for money.
And that's what frustrates me, because, while it may sound comical, what I do understand is that the last 3.5 years, we've lost a number of kids because of the funding cuts. And the more we move to these charter schemes and the latest, greatest silver bullet scheme, the more kids we lose. And I guess the jaded part of me looks at it, when you privatize education and you have a privatized prison industry, why would we be surprised when education is failing kids that end up in a for-profit prison industry?
The prison school pipeline. I mean, where are they making more money is the question. And
on
Bill
both
Gates,
ends.
he has investments in both. I mean, he has investments in Common Core and the technology they have to buy to run Common Core and the test prep, and he has investments in the private prison industry. So, to me, that sounds like a pretty big conflict of interest. You're right. I mean, it's the human toll of what this is doing. The fact that there's so many kids that are suffering because of this. I mean, really suffering. That they think that it's them, that they're dumb. They just don't understand how to do these standardized tests correctly. Right. That school is just not for them. No, it's not that. It's not that. It's that we're not giving them what they need. Poor kids who come from impoverished families have needs that, middle class or upper middle class or rich kids don't. I mean, if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, it's kind of hard to pay attention to fractions. If you're afraid you're going to be, hurt or killed on the way home, it's kind of hard to pay attention to nouns and verbs. And that's not hyperbole. That's what many of these kids deal with every day. I've lost many students, well, not many, but I've lost students. I mean, I have had students who didn't make it to adulthood. Most of them, since I teach middle school, most of them had happened after they left my class. But I did have one who was shot. She didn't die from her wounds. But, I mean, this is a reality for some kids, for, middle class people like myself. You look at it and you think, oh, that can't be real. No, this is their life.
Yep.
So, unless we do something to help these kids, unless we stand up and say, these kids matter, unless we provide, adequate, equitable, and sustainable school funding for all kids and not just some, because education is a right. It's not a privilege. We say all this great stuff about America. We wave the flag and we say, oh, we're the greatest country. We do this, that, and the other. If we really are the greatest, sometimes you got to actually do something about it.
There you go.
Not just say it.
Last question I've got for you. What do we do as parents? What do parents do to change this?
That's a great question. The best thing that parents can do is to opt out of standardized testing. Because right now, that is the big thing. That's where these companies are making their money, in the standardized tests. In the state of Pennsylvania, and I believe nationwide, you don't have to take them. Your child does not have to take these tests. You can opt out. Your child, you saw in the
right. You need to have a religious.
Florida.
You have to have a religious reason. I did it last year.
That's what you have to say.
Yep.
Right. That's the tack you have to take. And I mean, if you have any kind of morality where you think that it's wrong to treat kids this way, you could call that a religious objection.
As I said, the ethic of reciprocity. Do unto others.
That's all it takes, right? I mean, you could be an atheist, you could be whatever. You don't have to. It doesn't matter what. As long as you have some morality, you could definitely call upon that to do that, and it would starve the testing industry of the data that they're running on. And I think some parents think it's going to hurt their kids if they opt them out, but by state law, they have to give the children alternative assessments. They have to give them other ways, other things that they can give the kids, like a project or whatever, to count for the testing. And there's so many colleges now that don't even require the SAT, because we're in such a disconnect now. The academic world realizes already this is nonsense. So it's not something that's going to really hurt the kids. It's something that's going to help them. And if enough parents do that, if enough parents opt out, if enough school boards opt out, if enough teachers have the courage, which is really hard, to opt out of the testing, then we can halt this in the tracks.
I'm right there with you, Stephen. And as we continue this, I'd love to have you back, talk a little bit more about this, especially as the York thing continues down the road. I got to take a quick break, but thanks so much, and thanks for the great work you do over there at the Gadfly on the Wall blog.wordpress.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Stephen Singer's name. Take you right there. Stephen, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream. This is a fading American dream.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in Two. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. As he leaves American soil, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will return home triumphant. He's increased his public image and raked in billions of foreign investment dollars from U.S. corporations. Such investment will boost the Indian economy, but the AIDS advocacy group Health Gap says that for the good of many around the world, the U.S. should refrain from interfering with the Indian pharmaceutical industry.
India is now the center, really, of the production of low-cost, high-quality generic AIDS drugs for people living with HIV around the world.
Matthew Kavanagh is a senior policy analyst with Health Gap.
In the U.S., a year's worth of first line or second line, kind of some of the newer AIDS drugs, can cost you upwards of $15,000 to $20,000. In India, they're being produced now for $95 per patient per year. So we've seen more than 99% reduction in the cost of drugs by making them generically.
Kavanaugh says Modi is facing major pressure from U.S. drug makers, unhappy with the way public health considerations factor into Indian patent law, and they want more restrictions on generic suppliers. If Modi caves to that pressure, AIDS patients and their loved ones could be hard hit.
If the changes in the laws mean that Indian companies are no longer allowed to make all of these really important drugs, then actually it's really hard to see where we might look to. There's some important industry in Latin America, South Africa, there's some more important industry in Egypt, but none of whom have the scale and quality that exists in the Indian marketplace. It's ironic because one of the signature foreign policy initiatives of the United States government has been the response to HIV. All of that would be massively undermined if the United States government itself wasn't able to buy low-cost generic HIV drugs from India and import them into countries in Africa.
For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and all around the world. I've got Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So I understand the guy with Ebola, or maybe exposed to potentially Ebola, that went to the doctor, that they turned away and then gave some antibiotic that would have been worthless. I guess there's chaos around him.
Well, yes, Rick. He said he had been in Liberia. They sent him home. He came back. Now it's grown from it. If you just give me a second to go through this, because it's mind-boggling from when I started reporting this morning on this. Originally, 12 to 18 people first came in contact with him, and that's what we were talking about, 12 to 18 people. Now it's 100 potential contacts. The main base of group of people are 12 to 18. Now, as they're saying from Dallas County Health and Human Services, quote, it's constantly evolving. People are going to get added. People are going to drop off. 5 schools in the Dallas Independent School District area sent letters home with parents informing them of a student at the individual schools may have been in contact with the Ebola patient. The schools included these, 5 schools that they named. Now, the 5 students, none of whom showed symptoms, were told to stay at home away from school. The 12 to 18 person primary group have been quarantined in their apartment, and the apartment manager, Sally Nurin, who manages the Ivy Apartments where this Mr. Duncan, he's been identified now, lives, said during a press conference that health officials alerted her as the property manager. They've quarantined it. The family is not allowed to go out onto the porch. The house needs to be clean, so they're bringing in independent cleaning crews. They're having trouble finding one.
Yeah, no kidding.
And quote, the house conditions need to be improved. They said at a press conference, we've been working to identify an entity that will go out and do the cleaning. There has been hesitancy, but we've identified, and we hope it'll take place today. They also have a local law enforcement agency monitoring the apartment. The complex is home to residents of many different nationalities, of course, and many different people. So, and I can go on and on with this. of just all of this massive effort for one man, one apartment, and what all they're having to do. Let's just say hypothetically, Rick, that 15 more people come from one of these, countries with Ebola, and this starts to happen in 15 more places. You can just start to put the scenario together through your mind.
Oh, the chaos. I mean, I'm listening to this now. I mean, the chaos that I can't imagine that's being caused in that community with 5 schools full of parents going, oh my God, my little precious has been exposed. I can't imagine that chaos, let alone magnifying that 1, 2, 5, 15 times everywhere else.
Law enforcement assigned to the apartment, since they are quarantined, somebody has to bring them food. Somebody has to, bring them necessarily their toiletries, things they need. I mean, it's just staggering on just one person who is infected.
See, this is where I'm not a free trade person. I'm not an open borders person. I never have been. There are things that I say that, there are reasons that we have borders. Like we have I don't know where you live, if they got these damn bugs by you. They call them stink bugs or whatever. They came from Vietnam. And the wonders of free trade. Thank you to free trade. We now have this invasive species that there are no known predators here for, that are just basically taking over. To me, there's a reason that you have barriers between us so that this stuff doesn't continue to spread. Or am I going too far?
I'm one who's always like you. I try to keep an open mind about things, but on this one, I'm with you 1,000%. Of course, I was against all free trade agreements when I was in Congress, but I'm with you. I mean, there's going to come a point in time, I can see it now, where if you're in those countries, I don't care if you're American or who you are, you're not going to be able to leave those countries until this is contained within. I don't know how else to cure it. I don't know how we can. Are there 10 more people coming tonight? And are we going to clean their apartments? Are we going to have law enforcement there? Are we going to take them their groceries for 21 days? I mean, there's going to have to be some decisions made. And I think not letting them leave is probably going to be one of them.
I had a friend that, since you brought this up, years ago, he was in Korea. He was in the military in Korea. He used to say that, they gave out condoms to all the servicemen because if you got something over there called the Black Death, don't really know what it was, but he called it the Black Death. He said, if you got that there, they just buried you there. You weren't allowed back into the U.S. They would let you nowhere near the plane that even took you back to the U.S. And you died there, and they buried you there. They wouldn't even let them bring your body back home. And there's part of me that goes, I understand.
And also, there's another. I went and surfed this in Wiki and some other articles I could find. The disease itself, and then they said, well, you have to have extreme contact or body fluids, but yet. People that had went down as healthcare workers who did not have sexual contact down there caught Ebola. So how did that happen? I mean, are we being told that, the entire story here?
That's the other question.
The medical offices. And we keep hearing about mutation. Does this virus mutate? Does it become contagious in other ways? Lord forbid, airborne. But what? We don't know enough about it.
And that's the thing that bothers me. It's not that maybe we're not being told enough. It's maybe we just don't know. I mean, we like to think we know everything, but maybe we just don't know how this reacts in every circumstance.
And then you have the constant human error. I mean, I can see where, there were errors in the Secret Service, et cetera. There's so many human errors going on nowadays. I don't know. We try to create some kind of world where it doesn't happen, and it does. I mean, they went into a hospital, and Rick, if you and I were working in that ER room that night, and the man came in and said, oh, yeah, I just got back from Liberia, I think we'd look at each other and go, okay, maybe we need to do some special, effects here.
I think if you and I were having that conversation, Bob, I think you'd be the only one having it because I'd be out of there.
Yes. Well, I don't want to admit it. You're more candid than I am.
Seriously, that's why I'm not in the health profession. I give those people credit, but they're in the places where the germs are. People go to those places to die. That's where they get sick. That's why I hate hospitals.
Well, I used to visit a lot of people in hospitals in my previous position, and I used a lot of hand sanitizer as I walked out. So
Yeah, I mean, but and this is to me another one of those moments where you go, this jet setting all over the world thing got to stop at some level. And you're right. If you went to Liberia, good luck. You're there until we quarantine you there.
Right. Yeah, because we're never going to be. I read this preparing for your show tonight, and I read this over a couple of times, and it makes you tired reading it, of the amount of effort for one human being.
Jeez.
It's just bizarre.
It is absolutely bizarre. Let's move along. I understand that military families may be targeted from the ISIS people.
Yes, this one's a chilling effect. ISIS seems to be, of any group we've ever dealt with, the masters of terror. They really are. ISIS has made it known, and this bulletin came out in what's called our Army Threat Integration Center, and they've made it known that they want their supporters, people that sympathize and support them, to go hunt out families of soldiers and to kill them. They said use the yellow pages, the social media to identify the addresses of military families and, quote, show up at their homes and slaughter them.
Wow.
So obviously this is making a chilling effect with our military, who are worried about their families, and also, some of the people that are unbalanced that may not be ISIS people, but think, wow, I'm going to buy into this thing, and they start going after some of the military families. Of course, everybody's on social networks.
Yep.
It's not hard. You post pictures of your loved ones in the military. And so they're just warning them to take some more precautions. And also, they're saying, and this is the House Intelligence Committee, is saying that ISIS is using the terror network to recruit as many as 3,400 people per month. And they're being very successful in their social networking recruiting efforts.
Wow. And, all it's going to take is one incident here. And you can hear the cry for war. All it's going to take is one family, and you can see. I can see the cry for let's all in, turn the place to glass.
You have the House Speaker last week, John Boehner, who didn't hesitate to say somebody's boots have to go on the ground. It could be ours. Okay, you heard him say that. Now we've had the president say we're not going to do boots on the ground, yet we've expanded the amount of actual, let's put it, soldiers and military on foreign soil. I won't call them boots on the ground. And when you add in this and some other potential problems that occur, soldiers being killed, and the fact that today, Rick, it's been announced that ISIS is still making gains land back despite the bombings, because bombings only last so long unless you carpet bomb everything.
Right.
Then at some point in time, I am arguing, and I've heard this from colleagues in D.C., some point in time, somebody's boots are going on the ground.
Yeah, and even if you call them slippers, they're still going to be there.
They're going to be there.
Sad
People
stuff.
in uniform.
Sad stuff, because, well, I guess the other question becomes then, and I had someone ask me this the other day, did we create ISIS? I know we created bin Laden and the Taliban and all that. Did we create ISIS? Is this what the whole thing in Syria has brought us?
There is no question that if you look at two things, one, the invasion of Iraq based on the line, yes, I know Saddam was a bad guy, so is the premier of China. We didn't invade China.
Right.
But, Saddam was a bad guy. The invasion of Iraq, Saddam was a brutal but driving force there that kept things, intact, and sometimes in bad ways. I understand that. But we went in there. The second thing that we did, I'm talking about the Bush administration with the we, is Don Rumsfeld. They dismantled the entire military and police force of Iraq, dismantled the entire thing, appointed governor, I'll call him President Bremer, Governor Bremer of Iraq, an American is governor of a country. Think about that. And they destroyed the infrastructure of the military police units is what the Bush administration did.
Yes.
So I believe, if you look historically, destabilized the Mideast. Now, you're going to get John McCain saying, well, we needed to do the surge. President Bush was on TV tonight, these predictions he had when they needed to do the surge. Well, maybe we needed to not go in there in the first place.
Amen.
Because they didn't attack us.
I'm right there with you. Absolutely right there. And finally, let's move on. Turkish lawmakers voted today to authorize military force against ISIS. Turkey's involved now?
Yes, 298 to 88, it was big time. And originally they tried to stay out of this. They had 45 some hostages in there. They didn't want any part of it. But these refugees are flooding into the country. ISIS is taking more of territory. And after all, Turkey has never been the darling of the Islamic world because Ataturk made it a more secular country. So Turkey finally got into the fray with the rest of them.
So isn't this, if we want to use the coalition of the willing thing, isn't this that whole region kind of going, we got to do something? And wouldn't this be a good time for us to go ahead?
Oh, absolutely. It's out there. It's building. It's gasoline waiting for some match.
Not a good future. Not a good future. Bob, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you so much.
Bob Ney, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Question: is making higher education available to every American more important to our national interest than letting Wall Street profiteers make a few more billions of dollars each year? Answer: of course. Yet, our political leaders, pushed by Wall Street lobbyists, have been making the opposite choice for years. As a result, banksters have loaded students down with a mountain of high-interest loans, rising from just over $2 billion a decade ago to nearly $1 trillion last year. Worse, the financiers, either banks or government lenders, have become the gatekeepers of advanced education, shutting out thousands of young people wanting to get ahead but not able to hurdle the formidable financial barrier. This is enormously costly to America and completely unnecessary. The smart choice, as we learned from the GI Bill after World War II, would be to make college and professional training free. Universal access to higher education, i.e. free access, produces a very high return on the public's investment while also producing a widely shared prosperity and a broadly educated citizenry. Of course, an upfront investment in a smarter, more productive, more democratic civilization is pricey. So where do we get the money to do what America needs? Get it from where it went. Wall Street's super-rich speculators are now making millions of super-fast robotic financial transactions per second, generating trillions of dollars a year for them, but producing nothing of real value for us, while distorting and endangering markets. This is Jim Hightower saying, put a tiny tax on each of those automated gambles by speculators, and more than enough money will come into the public coffers to free up higher ed for all. For information, check out United States Students Association at www.usstudents.org.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Well, it's October, and in some places, voters are already voting. And the question is what's important? What are the topics? What's important to the average American voter? Top of the voters' list of most important issues, according to a new AP GFK poll, 19% said the economy, jobs. 12 cite the next on the list, terrorism and national security. Likely voters give Republicans a narrow edge as the party more trusted to handle the economy, 36 to 31. And I find that difficult to believe. simply because Obama has been wonderful for Wall Street. He's been wonderful for the economy, for the handfuls. On the healthcare front, though 8 in 10 call healthcare an important issue for them personally, just 5% named healthcare as the top issue facing the country. Overall, a quarter support the healthcare program, 40% oppose it, 34% neutral, which I guess is about the same. On the immigration front, about 2/3 of likely voters call illegal immigration a serious problem, and 8% name it or border security as a top issue. Only 35% say they approve of how Obama is handling the issue. The threat of terrorism, 8 in 10 likely voters say terrorism is a key issue for them personally, with Republicans more apt than Democrats to consider it important. No difference by gender. Republicans have a 16-point advantage among likely voters as the party more trusted to protect us, 39 to 23. Social issues, Democrats hold the strongest advantage on polls such as abortion and same-sex marriage, yet these issues are at the bottom of virtually everyone's list of priorities. Most of the issues, neither issue had even 1%. Female voters are more likely to call both issues important. And you look at this stuff and you go, are we surprised? The economy, number one. Duh. Jobs. Duh. Of course. And it kind of makes me go, did I need someone to take a poll for that? Did we need that? Did we need the poll? Really? And I guess, well, I don't know. It's just one of those things that stop you dead. And, I don't know. It's frustrating on a number of levels. Anyway, the Pope has a couple of tips. We'll finish up on the Pope's idea on how you have a happier life. You live and let live. Gee, who'd have known? The number one papal policy is live and let live. He says everyone should be guided by the principle. Just let things happen. Live and let live. Number 2, be giving of yourself to others, which means if you see somebody that needs a helping hand, be willing to be that helping hand. He said, be more generous, be more open towards others. Because if you withdraw into yourself, he says, you run the risk of becoming egocentric, and stagnant water becomes putrid. Interesting. I kind of like this Pope, to be honest with you. Interesting philosophy. His number 3 way to have a happy life, proceed calmly in life. The Pope, who evidently used to teach school literature, has used the image from an Argentinian novel in which the protagonist looks back on how he lived his life. So, proceed calmly. It's interesting. Number 4, a healthy sense of leisure. Which means don't get caught up in the whole consumer thing. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Maybe turn off the TV set and, play with the kids. Spend a little time. And this comes into our work life as well. And I'm one of the worst, and I'm working on it, pulling back from doing so much work to spend a little more time going, hey, there are flowers in my yard. So maybe the Pope is changing me even. He writes, Sundays should be holidays, something I've always agreed with. I 100% agree with the blue laws of the 50s. Sundays should be off limits. There should be nothing but vital services on Sunday. If we can't shut down for one day a week to enjoy family and life, there's something seriously wrong. Just a thought. Number 6, find innovative ways to create dignified jobs for young people. Back to the idle hands thing. If you don't have opportunities and you don't have things to do, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Because as the Pope says, we need to have creative things to do for young people so that they don't get into drugs and all of that stuff. And as he pointed out, and be more vulnerable to suicide. Sounds reasonable. Maybe we should get them jobs. Number 7, respect and take care of nature. Oh, there he's gone and done it. Talking about the environment, talking about taking care of the place where we live, where we breathe, where we drink water. Wow, think about that. He says, stop being negative. Needing to talk badly about others indicates low self-esteem. He says it means I feel so low that instead of picking myself up, I have to cut others down. The Pope said, letting go of negativity and negative things quickly is healthy. Number 9, and I find this one very interesting. Don't proselytize. Respect others' beliefs. He says we can inspire others through witness so that one grows together in communicating. He says the worst thing of all is religious proselytism, which paralyzes. He says, I'm not talking with you in order to persuade you. No, each person's dialogue started with his own identity. And finally, work for peace. Wow. Peace, social justice, leisure. I don't know. I think we're taking the Catholic Church back when I was going to school. Very, very, very strange. Good stuff, though. I appreciate you being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the